My flirtatious youngest sister had toyed with 3 different men. Worse, she had used my name and second sister's. When all 3 men came to our door to propose marriage, our parents, desperate to settle the matter, suggested that each of us 3 sisters marry one of them. If word of this gets out, where will our family put its dignity? They said. Besides, your younger sister has a good eye. All 3 young men look excellent. Left to your own devices, you might never find husbands as good as these. Your third sister has been beautiful and charming since childhood. People have always adored her. Otherwise, how could she have made 3 men come and ask for her hand at once? Second sister hesitated. But I refuse. Why should I, when I have done nothing wrong, marry a man who once loved my own sister? Am I not worthy of a clean, uncomplicated love of my own? I raised my head and looked at third sister, who was avoiding my eyes. Calmly I said, "First, tell me exactly how you became involved with those 3 men." My tone was not especially harsh. Third sister seemed to breathe a little easier, but second sister looked deeply worried. She knew I was angry, and that this was not the sort of anger that could easily be soothed. Neither second sister nor I was favored by our parents. As the eldest daughter, I had at least once received their wholehearted love. But from the moment second sister was born, they had disliked her for not being a boy. As she gradually came to understand things and realized that our parents did not love her, she began following me everywhere, becoming my little shadow. Her looks were ordinary, but she was kind, intelligent, discreet, thoughtful, and altogether a wonderful young woman. She quickly realized that I was drawing the truth out of third sister, so she understood that this matter could not simply be brushed aside. She shrank back slightly and no longer dared look at me. I kept my eyes fixed on third sister, making it clear that I would not tolerate a lie. Our parents wanted to hear the story too. They encouraged her to tell them everything she had done. Third sister cleared her throat and began recounting it all with unmistakable pride, her face growing brighter as she spoke. None of the 3 felt ashamed. On the contrary, they looked pleased. A wave of sorrow rose in my heart. With parents like these, no wonder my younger sister had become so shameless. Third sister said she had met the first young man while strolling through a temple fair. Her purse was stolen. There was not much money inside, but it mattered greatly to her, because she had been longing to buy a floral hairpin and a silk ribbon. The man who recovered the purse for her was Gu Nianzhang. Blushing, she invited him to have a bowl of sugar water. In return, he gave her a wooden puppet, and that was how they became acquainted. Later, they arranged to climb mountains together, take boat rides, worship the bodhisattva at a temple, and hang a prayer plaque bearing both their names on the temple's marriage tree. She spoke sweetly, as though savoring those happy memories all over again. I immediately interrupted her, whose name was written on the prayer plaque. A trace of disappointment flickered across third sister's face. My own. My gaze darkened slightly, though inwardly I felt a little relieved. At that time, she had not yet conceived her malicious plan. She had still used her real name when making promises with Gu Nianzhang. Her disappointment was probably because she later met someone she considered better and regretted giving Gu Nianzhang her real name. But she could have explained everything to him and ended their relationship cleanly. Instead, she greedily wanted to keep them both. It was truly hateful. She met the second man on a rainy day. His name was Song Qingyuan. Seeing that she was having difficulty walking through the rain, he gave her an umbrella. The next day, she returned it. After several meetings, feelings grew between them. Yet by then, she and Gu Nianzhang were already in love. She could not bear to give up Gu Nianzhang's gentleness and attentiveness, nor could she let go of the new excitement she felt for Song Qingyuan. Deep down, however, she must have known that keeping one foot in 2 boats courting 2 men at once was immoral. So when Song Qingyuan asked her name, she blurted out, "Mine." Third sister pouted. "I did not mean to do it. I was simply too frightened at the time. You have no idea how good he is or how wealthy his family is. The oil paper umbrella he gave me was beautiful. I found you an excellent marriage match. You must thank me later, and remember to prepare a very large red envelope for me." Our parents nodded. It did not sound bad to them at all. They eagerly questioned her about Song Qingyuan's family background without offering a single word of rebuke. Rage flared inside me. I drew a deep breath, forced it down, and continued, "What about the third man? How did you meet him?" Third sister's face immediately filled with panic. An inexplicable dread rose in my heart. I slammed my right hand on the table and shouted sternly. With a thud, third sister dropped to her knees before our parents and burst into sobs. "Father, mother, I cannot marry this man. Let second sister marry him instead." I used second sister's name anyway. "He does not know that the woman was me. Just let second sister marry him." Once they have completed the wedding rites, it will be too late for him to regret it. Father, mother, I will not marry him, she wept pitifully. But her guilty conscience was obvious. Our parents hurried to help her up, yet their eyes involuntarily shifted towards second sister. They had likely guessed that this third man was no good. Their beloved youngest daughter absolutely could not marry him, which meant someone else had to be sacrificed. I had always been strong, while second sister was gentle and weak. To them, she was the most suitable choice. Second sister's face went blank for a moment, then her eyes reddened. Biting her lip, she raised her head rigidly, afraid that even the smallest movement would be taken as silent agreement to marry that man. Enough. I seized a teacup and hurled it at third sister. It struck her. She cried out, clutched her forehead, and stared at me in terror. Her mouth fell open and her lips trembled, but she could not utter a word. Our parents glared at me furiously. What are you doing? I rose and fixed my gaze on third sister, who was kneeling on the floor pretending to be pitiful. I saw straight through her hypocrisy and selfishness. Tell me exactly what you have done, I said, enunciating every word with icy precision. Otherwise, I will immediately send someone to call those 3 men back and tell them the entire truth. Father and mother may protect you, but not everyone in this world is your parent. She was finally frightened. Stammering, she told us everything that had happened between her and the third man. She had arranged to meet Gunyanzhang at a Guan temple in the mountains, only to discover that Song Qingyuan had come there that same day. With both men appearing at the same temple, she did not dare go inside, no matter how interesting the place might have been. She slipped out through a rear gate and planned to take a shortcut down the mountain. That decision led her to a man whose entire body was burning hot. He seized her wrist, covered her mouth, and carried her into a room against her will. Afterward, he asked her name. Trembling with fear, she gave him second sisters. The man laughed softly. I will come to your home another day to propose marriage. Then he fell asleep. She put her clothes back on and stumbled home. She did not know who he was or what he did. She did not even dare believe that he could truly find her home. Yet not only had he discovered where she lived, he had actually come to ask for her hand. How could I possibly marry a man of such vile character? She sobbed. I was terrified. I was unwilling. He forced me. One look at him tells you he is not a good man. He looks fierce too. Who knows whether he is some mountain bandit? Father, mother, save me. I will not marry him. Let second sister go instead. Once her bridal veil is lowered, no one will recognize her. Eldest sister will marry Song Qingyuan, and second sister will marry that man. Let us settle it that way. Father, mother, please agree, she cried, and pleaded with outrageous entitlement. That tactic had always worked before, but today our parents finally behaved like human beings for once. You truly are muddle-headed, they scolded. You were harmed yourself. How can you turn around and harm your second sister? We can simply reject this marriage. Never mention this idea again. What matters now is finding a way to conceal the fact that you have lost your chastity. How could Gunyanzhang still want you? You have been foolish beyond words. Our parents were furious. Father beat his chest and stamped his feet. Mother embraced third sister and wailed, we cannot refuse the marriage. What if that man goes out and talks? Young Master Gu will become suspicious. I have a way, third sister said. I will marry young Master Gu first. On the wedding night, second sister can sneak in and sleep with him in my place. After that, second sister can marry the third man. He already knows that I am no longer a virgin anyway. That day, his mind was clouded, so he may not have seen my face clearly. It was already dark when he asked my name. He certainly will not be able to distinguish me from second sister. We can definitely deceive him. Second sister only needs to help me. Second sister, I beg you, please save me. Third sister had always presented herself as carefree and guileless, yet in a single instant she had devised so many schemes. She had absolved herself of every consequence while arranging both my life and second sister's in perfect order. I had underestimated her. Our parents hesitated. They looked toward second sister, their lips moving without a word, but their meaning could not have been clearer. Second sister could no longer curl into herself and hide. She stared at her parents and her own flesh-and-blood sister in disbelief, unable to comprehend how such vicious words could come from their mouths. She trembled, her whole body shaking with anger, yet she could not force out a single sentence. Worse still, before she could speak, tears had already begun to fall. My heart turned cold. I slowly stood, pushed our parents aside, seized third sister still kneeling on the floor and begging through her tears, hauled her upright, and slapped her across the face as hard as I could. What beast has possessed you? You care only whether you live or die, without the slightest concern for our lives. What are second sister and I in your eyes? Why should the men you no longer want be forced upon us? Who do you think you are, arranging our lives however you please? I slapped her again and again. Some of those blows undoubtedly carried my private desire for revenge. When had the bond between us sisters become this rotten? When we were little, third sister was fair-skinned and adorable. We both liked her, and so did our parents. Even then, however, she was not yet the most pampered person in our family. Our parents still desperately wanted a son. Then one year, a wandering Taoist stopped at our house to ask for water. After drinking, he offered to tell our family's fortune. Our parents were delighted and immediately asked whether they would have a son. The Taoist shook his head and raised 3 fingers. Our parents understood at once. They were fated never to have a son, and would have only 3 daughters. Before that, they had struggled against accepting such a fate. But when destiny seemed to appear before them, they could no longer deny it. Seeing the gloom on their faces, the Taoist smiled again. The workings of heaven number 49, leaving one path of escape to humankind. Though you are not destined to have a son, you bear the signs of people blessed with good fortune. All the wealth and honor of this household rest upon your youngest daughter. She was born under a destiny of prosperity. Raise her well, and her blessings will one day be immeasurable. He patted third sister on the head, laughed, and departed. Our parents' eyes landed on her and blazed like fire. Yet as long as people are alive, few can truly resign themselves to fate. At first they treated the Taoist's words merely as an auspicious blessing. They kept trying for several more years, but no son ever appeared. Only then did they begin to take his prophecy to heart. From that point on, third sister became different from us. She did not have to wash clothes, cook, or learn household work. Like a boy, she was allowed to attend school, read books, and practice calligraphy. She could run wildly through every street and alley, while second sister and I had to learn to cut and sew clothing and perform needlework. The boys at the academy competed to give her presents and escort her home. Our parents considered it a great honor. It was as if our family had truly produced a golden phoenix. Second sister and I felt the injustice clearly. If our parents wished to pamper her, we had no say in the matter, but the unfairness still tormented us so badly that we tossed and turned at night. Who would not want to read, write, and have meals and water brought to them? Who is born deserving a life of exhausting labor and service to others? At first, faced with such open favoritism, third sister had also felt uneasy. When she put on her new school bag, arranged her hair prettily, and left for school, she would look at us nervously. Only after we smiled would she relax and skip away happily. She could see that we envied her chance to study, so after school she would teach us to read and recognize characters. At that time, she still possessed some sisterly affection. She saw our sacrifices and understood us. But hearts change easily. After enjoying special treatment for too long, she began to regard everything as her natural right. She had not even finished teaching us the 3-character classic before deciding it was troublesome and refusing to continue. Second sister and I had to coax her with the private coins we had saved before she would teach us again. Later, I discovered that by the time she reached the latter passages, she had forgotten the earlier ones. She even taught several characters incorrectly. I realized then that her mind had never truly been on her studies. I tried to advise her. I was young and did not understand many principles, so all I could say was that she ought to treasure an opportunity that had been so difficult to obtain. She hated hearing that. She glared at me resentfully, her eyes reddening with tears, until she looked like a pitiful little rabbit. When our parents came to intervene, she immediately found a protector and buried herself in mother's arms, crying as though grievously wronged. Behind everyone's backs, however, she glared at me viciously. That was when I understood that this sister was no longer of one heart with us. She saw herself as someone above others. Her eyes, we had been reduced to servants. Later, whenever she dirtied her clothes, shoes, stockings, or school bag, she calmly handed them to us to clean. She never washed the dishes, tended the stove, made the beds, carried water, or chopped firewood. Our parents took it for granted that all such labor belonged to us. A tiny household had been divided into ranks of nobility and servitude solely because of parental favoritism. But who would willingly accept such a fate? Second sister and I clasped hands tightly. That night, neither of us could sleep. I asked softly, "Do you want to study?" She was silent for a long time before answering in a voice as faint as a mosquito's buzz. "The family only has enough money for one person to attend school, and someone still has to do the housework. Children who are too understanding are always the ones who suffer." She thought too much about others, empathized too deeply, and never wanted to put anyone in a difficult position, so she never asked for anything herself. If she met someone with a conscience, they would see her, ache for her, and offer her what she deserved. But if she met people without conscience, they would calmly ignore her needs and comfortably enjoy the benefits of her obedience. When someone finally pointed out the injustice, they would even look confused. Why did you not say anything? If you had told me, would I not have known? Yet those who truly care have eyes with which to see. They also carry a scale in their hearts called conscience. They do not treat another person's sacrifice as their natural due. I closed my eyes, determination gathering inside me. Second sister was right. We could not afford the academy, but hiring a literate child to teach us would cost far less. Tuition for a formal teacher required 1 tael of silver. A child who knew how to read needed only a few copper coins. Second sister and I took the private money we had earned and saved through needlework and hired the neighbor's son to teach us. The boy was overjoyed and instructed us with great seriousness and enthusiasm. Whenever he encountered something he did not understand, he asked his own teacher the next day, then returned to explain it to us. His parents turned a blind eye. Secretly, they were delighted that their son, despite his young age, could already earn money by teaching others. That was how we resumed our studies. Sometimes second sister attended the lesson, and sometimes I did. One of us studied while the other worked, then the one who had learned would teach the other. Later, our parents opened a shop and we began helping there. When they wanted to hire someone to keep the accounts, I recommended second sister. They were astonished. How could she possibly know how to keep accounts? I was the one who persuaded them. How can an outsider be trusted with the books as much as family? Besides, second sister is steady and reliable. If she does not keep the accounts, what else will she do? Stay home and live like a pampered young lady? Becoming a pampered young lady was impossible. Our household already had third sister, raised like a noble daughter and dressed in silk and brocade. We could not afford another. Our parents agreed, but gave second sister only 1 month. Even so, it was an exceptionally good opportunity. She was so happy, she nearly cried. When a person has rarely been valued or given a chance, the moment an opportunity appears, she wants to seize it with her life. If her handwriting was poor, she practiced again and again. If she did not understand bookkeeping, she went to learn. We carried a disorderly account book to the head clerk of the neighboring shop and asked for guidance. He frowned with obvious distaste. But when he saw the confusion and fear on second sister's face, he finally accepted our gift and patiently taught her. Little by little, the accounts were put in order. After that, I wanted to take charge of purchasing stock for our shop. Our parents refused. They thought I was trying to overturn the household and seize their property. But I had already made up my mind. I did not need their approval. If I wanted to do something, I would do it. I carefully memorized the maidservants from wealthy households who came to buy goods. Sometimes I even spent my own money on small complimentary gifts for them. After many visits, I gradually became acquainted with those maidservants. I learned their preferences and remembered what they usually bought. Once, a young maid looked over the merchandise in our shop and frowned. The lady of our household prefers restrained, elegant colors. Your goods are too bright and gaudy. They do not suit noble ladies, and even maidservants from wealthy homes would not care to use them. I remembered her words and thanked her. The next time father purchased stock, I deliberately went with him and selected a batch in colors completely different from his choices. Father disapproved, but because he cared about saving face, he merely glared fiercely at me, expecting me to recognize the difficulty and back down on my own. When I offered to pay part of the cost myself, he finally agreed. When the goods went on sale, everything I had selected sold quickly and completely. After father suffered several more failures, he had no choice but to hand the shop's purchasing and sales over to me. Second sister and I had finally gained a firm foothold, and our lives improved day by day. Third sister grew older and eventually stopped attending the academy. She had plenty of time to dress and adorn herself. She knew every new garment, ornament, and fashionable style by heart. Even without much money, she could buy a few small items and combine them in ways that made her stand out. She truly had talent in that regard. I asked whether she wanted to come learn the shop business with me. My intentions were sincere. She was still my sister after all. By then I already understood that our parents were unreliable. We could not depend on them, and I did not believe they would become third sister's support in the future either. They had placed far too much hope upon her. If she became what they expected, perhaps all would be well. But if she failed to meet those expectations, the backlash would be severe, and she might not endure it. I hoped she could learn at least one skill with which to support herself. Even if the Taoist's prophecy never came true, she could still live a good life. Third sister reacted as though I had insulted her. Her face flushed and her cherry-red lips parted. How could I possibly do such degrading work? Aggrieved and resentful, she ran to complain to our parents. I felt as though lightning had struck me. Degrading work? Had she always regarded second sister and me as lowly people? The last scraps of sisterly affection in my heart shattered at once. Second sister tugged my hand and gently shook her head. My heart went completely cold. Third sister stopped calling me eldest sister, and I stopped calling her my younger sister. We became strangers living beneath the same roof. I left early and returned late, busy with the shop and the household, working hard to secure something more for myself so that my empty heart would have something solid to stand on. She remained noisy, lively, and carefree. The house was always filled with her cheerful laughter. Her complete lack of restraint only made second sister and me more silent. On many nights I heard her laughing and felt irritated. Then one night, when her noise kept me from sleeping, I suddenly understood. She could laugh because she was absolutely certain this place was her home. I could not laugh because I was equally certain it was not a place where I could build a life. Some people seem to be born without a home. The night I understood that, I wept bitterly. Second sister climbed out of bed and silently watched me. Barefoot, she came to my bedside, her eyes full of worry and understanding. "I am fine," I whispered. "Go back to sleep. I only need to cry for a while." Obediently, she returned to bed. I heard my own muffled sobs. But the next morning, her eyes were swollen and red too. She had also cried, only without making a sound, as quiet as a frightened little bird. Though panic must have made her heart feel ready to burst, she had not dared make the slightest noise. The house was like a dark forest. Some birds were forbidden to sing. Did we envy the bird that could sing as loudly as it pleased? Of course we did. That envy accumulated day after day until it finally gave birth to hatred. Most of the time, it lay silent, but when it truly erupted, even I was shocked by its force. Our parents desperately held me back as I struggled, wishing I could kick third sister to death. Only when father seized my arm and mother struck me across the face with all her strength, did I seem to awaken from my violent rage. Half my face went numb. The faint taste of blood spread through my mouth. I stared coldly at mother. Frightened by my gaze, she stepped back. Father released me and roared, "Were you trying to beat her to death? You are her elder sister. What kind of elder sister behaves like this? You are the elder sister. What is wrong with yielding a little to your younger sister? You are the elder sister, so of course you must protect her. You are the elder sister. You are the elder sister." What? Is being an elder sister a crime? Does it mean I must wear a tightening band around my head for the rest of my life? My voice was as cold as ice, carrying hatred carved into my bones. So what if I am her elder sister? Must I yield to her all my life? Must I die in her place? I am only 3 years older than she is. I yielded to her for those 3 years, and that was enough to honor our sisterly bond. After that, I am myself and she is herself. If she treats me as an elder sister, I will treat her as my younger sister. If she does not, then she is a stranger. If she dares harm me, I will treat her like a beast. There is no principle in this world that says she may injure me, and I must thank her for it. Li Yunzhen, listen clearly. I have no sister like you. From this day forward, all affection and obligation between us are severed. My fury was so intense that everyone fell silent. Li Yunzhen held her face and stared at me in disbelief. She had never truly valued us. She believed she could arrange and dispose of us however she wished. We were not her sisters, but her maidservants, laborers, and slaves. She had always assumed everything she enjoyed was her natural right, but few things in this world are naturally owed. An elder sister is not required to yield forever, merely because she was born several years earlier. Yielding for those first few years is enough. Why should it continue for a lifetime? If a scale is to remain balanced, the love a younger sister gives her elder sister must be placed on the opposite side. If the younger sister does not love her, the elder sister has no duty to keep sacrificing. A 5-year-old elder sister should be compared with a 5-year-old younger sister. If the elder sister is expected to be sensible at 5, then the younger sister should also be expected to be sensible when she reaches 5. A 10-year-old elder sister should be compared with a 10-year-old younger sister. If the elder sister is expected to stand on her own at 10, then the younger sister should do the same when she becomes 10. That is fairness. There is no reason the younger sister should remain a child forever while the elder sister must always be an adult. Li Yunzhen had discarded me, and I discarded her in return. From that moment, no relationship remained between us. The house fell into a suffocating, frightening silence. Now and then came only the bubbling sound of father smoking his water pipe and mother's sobs as she wiped her tears. In the past, second sister and I would have softened. We would have pitied their predicament. This time I took second sister and left. Mother cried out. Father sighed. I pretended not to hear, and walked slowly through the doorway. Second sister did not understand, but she followed. We held each other's hands tightly. Eldest sister, where are we going? Once we left the alley, her shoulders slumped, and despair and fear entered her voice. My heart ached for her. In the fate Li Yunjin had arranged, second sister would have suffered most. She would have been forced to sleep with Gu Nianzhang, then endure the loathing of the man named Zhao Jingxiao. Was Gu Nianzhang a fool who could not distinguish between two different women? Was Zhao Jingxiao blind, able to use a woman as the antidote to the drug in his system, yet unable to recognize the woman with whom he had slept? That was nothing more than Li Yunjin deceiving herself. She only wanted to escape. She did not care whether second sister lived or died. Zhao Jingxiao had come to propose marriage because of Li Yunjin. On the wedding night, if he discovered that the bride had been switched, how could he possibly remain silent? Did she truly think everyone else was a fool who would play along with her scheme and swallow such humiliation? Marriage is a lifelong matter for both men and women. No one willingly accepts such disgrace. If Zhao Jingxiao accepted second sister, she would still face a miserable life after losing her chastity in another man's bed. If he rejected her and sent her home, her fate would be no better. Our parents would despise her for disgracing the family. Li Yunzhen would mock her for sleeping with Gu Nianzhang and find ways to torment her. With second sister's gentle, yielding nature, I could see no possible end for her but death. Li Yunzhen dared treat her this way because, of the three daughters, our parents disliked second sister most. She was not beautiful. She had inherited all our parents' flaws. She had a mild, unhurried, and yielding temperament, and she always wore a smile meant to please others. To those unable to see her virtues, a person like her seemed to have no future. They believed they could bully her and face no consequence. But I knew how good she was. She was gentle and attentive. No matter how difficult a customer might be, she could speak softly, identify the true reason behind the person's anger, and make it impossible for them to continue raging at her. She was thoughtful and deft with her hands. Many people could sew the same item, but only hers was always the most exquisite and best fitting. Her heart was like a clear mirror. She understood exactly who treated her well and who treated her badly. She simply did not wish to keep accounts every grievance. She would accept a small loss so long as she could preserve what she treasured. Her only modest wish was to marry someday and have a home that would make room for her. In that home, she could cry when she wished, laugh when she wished, and sing when she wished. I wanted the same. Li Yunjin had shattered that dream. She had enjoyed every sweet moment of courting those men, then tried to leave the bitter fruit for us. Nothing in this world comes so cheaply. I had memorized where all three households lived. I decided to visit each one and ask directly what had happened. As we approached Song Qingyuan's neighborhood, I stopped and knocked first on the doors of several nearby households. "Auntie, do you know where young Master Song Qingyuan lives?" I asked. "He came to my home to propose marriage, but I do not know him. I wanted to ask whether he might have mistaken me for someone else." The woman pointed the way, and I thanked her with a smile. Then I deliberately knocked on another neighbor's door. After asking at several supposedly wrong houses, I finally reached Song Qingyuan's gate. By then, several people were already standing outside watching us. I gave my name. A young servant went inside to announce me. Not long afterward, Song Qingyuan came out personally. He had probably hurried all the way, for he was still smiling. But the moment he saw my face clearly, his delight turned to confusion. "May I ask whether this young lady is looking for me?" "I am Li Yunlan of Locust Blossom Alley. You came to my home the other day to propose marriage, but I do not know you. I came today to ask whether you mistook me for someone else. Is the woman you wish to marry actually another person?" Song Qingyuan looked as though lightning had struck him. "Her name is Li Yunlan. Could there be another Li Yunlan in Locust Blossom Alley?" "I do not know what happened," I said. "I only came to confirm it. You do not know me, and I do not know you. We have never had any relationship, is that correct?" I looked at him calmly. At that moment he was innocent. Perhaps I should have told him the truth, but he had loved Li Yunjin. I could not guarantee that, after learning everything, he would not smear my reputation to protect the woman he loved. After my parents' and sister's betrayal, I would no longer assume the best of others so easily. I had to protect myself first, then decide, according to circumstances, whether anyone deserved trust. At that moment, Song Qingyuan wanted to distance himself from me even more urgently than I did. Seeing all the neighbors watching, he wanted no connection to me whatsoever. He raised his voice. That is correct. I do not know this young lady. The woman I wish to marry is another person, also named Li Yunlan, not her. I will investigate where the mistake occurred. That is good. Young Master Song may investigate again. Let the marriage proposal end here. I gave a small salute and turned away. Song Qingyuan returned it, then hurriedly told his servant, go find out whether another Li Yunlan lives in Locust Blossom Alley. No, forget it. I will go myself. How did this happen? I clearly saw her enter that very house. He sounded bewildered and anxious. I lowered my eyes and restrained my pity. Until he showed where he stood, I would not consider him an ally. Second sister and I went next to find Zhao Jingxiao. This time we met some difficulty. None of the surrounding neighbors knew anyone by that name, which deepened my suspicion. The matchmaker had clearly given us this location, and I trusted my memory. At last, I knocked on the gate of a residence that was clearly home to someone of high status. A dignified elderly man came out. After hearing me, surprise flashed in his eyes. He invited us inside to wait, but I refused. We were strangers. I did not dare casually lead second sister into another person's home, especially when unease was already stirring in my heart. The third man Li Yunzhen had entangled was certainly not decent. He might even come from a powerful household riven by vicious infighting. Otherwise, how would someone have managed to drug him? I did not dare enter such a residence lightly. The old man seemed to see my unease. He clasped his hands, asked us to wait a moment, and went back inside. Soon, a dignified-looking man emerged. He wore an inscrutable smile, but when he saw second sister and me, it faded and gave way to impatience. It was the impatience of someone who had long stood above others, directed at insignificant merchants like us. I often encountered such expressions when delivering goods to noble households. I had seen them too many times to be surprised. I repeated my explanation. The matchmaker came to our house and said that you wished to marry my second sister Li Yunqin. But she works in our shop every day, rarely goes out, and has never met you. May I ask whether you mistook her for someone else? Is my second sister truly the woman you intend to marry? Zhao Jingxiao's gaze swept over second sister's face. He immediately frowned, and open disgust appeared in his eyes, the disgust of someone looking at something ugly. He did not answer my question. He merely let out a cold, mocking snort. She dares deceive me. He cast us a sidelong glance and turned away without answering a single question. The old man said with distant courtesy, "We understand what you have said. We will investigate the truth ourselves. My master's standards are very high. Not just any woman can catch his eye. Young ladies, please return home." I did not argue. I turned and left. Only after walking a long distance did second sister and I stop. We discovered that our tightly clasped palms were drenched in sweat, and that fear still lingered in both our eyes. Thank heaven we had resisted. Thank heaven we had not relied on our parents or blindly obeyed Li Yunzhen. Zhao Jingxiao had called himself a prince. The woman he intended to marry would become a princess consort. Deceiving the imperial family was a crime that could cost every one of us our heads. His eyes were not blind. He would recognize the woman who had shared his bed. Only Li Yunzhen believed she could manipulate everyone as she pleased. She would reap the consequences herself. We did not visit Gunianzhang's home. Instead, we asked several children to deliver him a letter. It said that Li Yunzhen had offended her eldest sister, had been slapped and bullied, and that he must hurry over to save her. The moment Gunianzhang received it, he rushed to our house. I would not personally tell him the truth. He would not believe me. He might even think I was deliberately slandering Li Yunzhen. Some truths must be witnessed with one's own eyes. Only then could he decisively withdraw and avoid being dragged down with her. Zhao Jingxiao was no good man. The fact that he had forced a woman showed him to be narrow-minded and selfish. He would never tolerate Gunianzhang having once loved Li Yunzhen. Gunianzhang was innocent in this matter, but not every innocent person is necessarily good. I would not gamble on anyone's character. I only wanted to protect myself. For everything else, I could do my utmost and leave the rest to fate. Second sister and I slowly returned. A large crowd had gathered outside our house, and loud arguments came from the courtyard. The moment we reached the neighbor's door, it opened. The auntie next door grabbed both of us and pulled us inside. "Do not go home yet. If you return now, you are finished. Your parents will scold you to death." We listened in silence. The courtyard was in chaos. Song Qingyuan was demanding to know whether the family had another daughter named Li Yunlan. Gunianzhang wanted to see Li Yunzhen, but our parents prevented him from entering, which made him suspicious. Zhao Jingxiao's people arrived a little later, probably because their investigation had taken time. Seeing the disorder, they led men directly into the courtyard, searched the house, and dragged out Li Yunzhen, who had been hiding. Second sister and I entered the auntie's room, climbed onto the raised earthen bed, and looked through her rear window into our courtyard. Li Yunzhen had painted her face in garish colors. She must have believed that if she made herself look like a ghost, she could deceive everyone. Yet the instant she appeared, Gu Nianzhang called her Yunzhen, Song Qingyuan called her Yunlan, and Zhao Jingxiao laughed. He sat in a chair brought by one of his attendants, his smile both chilling and laden with hidden meaning. Miss Yunzhen, it seems you possess many names. Which one is real? He ordered someone to bring a basin of water, gripped Li Yunzhen's face, and washed it himself. His fingers scrubbed hard across her skin. Li Yunzhen cried out in terror, tears immediately spilling down her cheeks. Gu Nianzhang told Zhao Jingxiao to stop, but Zhao Jingxiao merely glanced at him. 2 guards immediately forced Gu Nianzhang to his knees. Song Qingyuan understood the situation quickly and knelt of his own accord. Perhaps that was the instinct of a merchant. His family was wealthy, his ancestors had traded for generations, and he was well informed. He could tell that Zhao Jingxiao's status was far from ordinary. Our parents were completely stunned, yet their eyes began to shine. Only then, perhaps, did they decide that the old Taoist's prophecy had come true today. The golden phoenix of their household had truly brought them a noble son-in-law. They leaned against each other, trembling too tense to breathe loudly. Zhao Jingxiao personally wiped the water from Li Yunzhen's face. Looking at her meek, pitiful face, he smiled in a way that sent a chill down one's spine. Then he wiped his hands clean and threw the cloth directly into Gu Nianzhang's face. She is my woman. I originally intended to make her my princess consort, but it now appears that she is wanton and shameless, and has entangled more than one man. His cold gaze swept across the 2 men kneeling on the ground. The elderly man beside him stepped forward. Prince Rong stands before you. Why have you not paid your respects? Everyone in the courtyard dropped to their knees. The auntie dared not keep watching and hurriedly pulled us down. We held our breath, afraid to make a sound, yet equally afraid of missing anything from the neighboring courtyard. Perhaps because everyone was too nervous, or perhaps because they wanted to declare their loyalty. Those who spoke deliberately raised their voices. I heard Song Qingyuan say loudly, "Your Highness, this commoner does not know this woman. The person I wish to marry is the Li family's eldest daughter, Li Yunlan. I beg your Highness to judge clearly." A roar filled my head. My mind went blank. To save himself, he had dragged me into the disaster. What a despicable man. What a bastard. He was every bit as disgusting as Li Yunzhen. I shook with rage, but another pair of hands tightened around mine. Eldest sister, do not be afraid. I will stay with you. If one of us must marry, I will do it. Do not be afraid. My eyes stung and my throat tightened. If an elder sister must yield to a younger sister, then the younger sister's love for her must balance the opposite side of the scale. I wished Li Yunzhen dead, but for Li Yunqin I would willingly die in her place. I squeezed her hand in return to tell her I was all right. I waited a long time without hearing Gu Nianzhang speak. At last he said, "I once knew a young woman named Li Yunzhen. But after your Highness washed this woman's face clean, I realized I had mistaken her for someone else. Please forgive me, your Highness." He did not drag anyone else into the matter. Was he truly a good man? I still did not dare trust him completely. Perhaps he did not know second sister's name. After all, he knew only Li Yunzhen, and he might not even know the Li family had 3 daughters. Had he known, perhaps he too would have sacrificed someone else. I could not be certain. I would watch longer. Father stepped forward to smooth things over. "Your Highness, Yunzhen is my most precious daughter. She has always been the most obedient and sensible of my daughters. She could never have carried on with a man in secret. Perhaps this young Master Gu knows our second daughter. Her name is Li Yunqin." "Young Master Gu, is that not so?" "Oh!" Zhao Jingxiao asked in a tone halfway between laughter and mockery. "Then I will decide the matter. How would you like to marry the Li family's second daughter?" His voice carried open, contemptuous ridicule. He had seen second sister's face and knew she was not beautiful. In his mind, forcing her upon Gu Nianzhang would itself be a punishment. Second sister heard it too. Her face turned pale, but she pressed her lips together and remained silent. She was accustomed to words like these. First impressions are always influenced by appearance. She had understood that long ago, yet this was the first time someone had humiliated her so publicly. Worse, father was offering her up as a sacrifice for Li Yunzhen. The auntie beside us was frantic. She lifted her hand and struck her own thigh, but so gently that no sound would carry next door. Every curse she wished to shout was written across her face. I listened in silence, filled with rage and despair, yet unwilling to accept any of it. But what could I do? Zhao Jingxiao was a madman. Like Li Yunzhen, he was selfish and cared nothing for anyone else's life. They both deserved to die. Yet I had no power, money, or support. I did not even know where to begin taking revenge. What else could I do? Was I supposed to sit and wait for disaster to descend? I had struggled so hard yet still seemed unable to escape this tangled marriage affair. Anxiety gnawed at my insides. At that moment, Gunyanzhang spoke. No. I have never met the Li family's second daughter, though I believe she must be a decent woman. Unfortunately, she is not the person I knew, and I would not dare ask your highness to force us into marriage. My heart already belongs elsewhere. I would not ruin an innocent woman's prospects. I mistook this woman for someone I knew and, in doing so, offended both your highness and your concubine. I am willing to accept punishment. He knelt on the ground, neither arrogant nor servile. I let out a quiet breath of relief. He really was a good man. Then I could not help laughing bitterly. Of the 3 men Li Yunzhen had entangled, she had kept the only decent one for herself and thrown the 2 pieces of scum at us. She was vicious to the marrow. Gunyanzhang was sentenced to 10 blows of the heavy staff, carried out immediately in the courtyard. Li Yunzhen cried out twice in fear. Zhao Jingxiao sneered and added another 10. Those additional 10 blows nearly killed Gunyanzhang and frightened everyone into absolute silence. When the punishment ended, Zhao Jingxiao looked coldly at Li Yunzhen, who was now too terrified even to cry. I originally intended to make you my princess consort. Now it appears that you are fit only to be my concubine. Stay obediently at home and do not run about. In 3 days I will come for you. He gave our parents a long look. Their expressions changed immediately, but they did not dare defend themselves. They could only bow and smile ingratiatingly. He left 2 elderly matrons to watch Li Yunzhen, then departed with his entourage in grand procession. The disturbance finally ended. Our parents, their faces flushed, invited the 2 matrons to remain. Li Yunzhen's lips trembled, but in the end she did not dare say, "I will not marry him." Instead, an excited blush appeared faintly on her face. Her emotions were complicated: tension, fear, delight, regret, and disappointment. She was thrilled by the windfall that had dropped from heaven, and regretted that she had almost thrown it away. Zhao Jingxiao's insistence on still wanting her gave her the pleasure of feeling valued. Yet she mourned that she might have become a princess consort and was now only a concubine. Immersed in her own feelings, she forgot our parents, forgot her sisters, and forgot Song Qingyuan trembling in fear and Gunyanzhang beaten half to death. No one slept well that night. Second sister and I stayed at the auntie's house. I pressed some money into her hand, but she adamantly refused. Only when we insisted did she sigh and accept it. "You 2 truly are pitiful," she murmured. "That Song Qingyuan is clever enough. Gunyanzhang is more stubborn. And that 3rd man is actually a prince. Good heavens! How did Yunzhen come to know him? What extraordinary fortune!" The old Taoist's words were true after all. No wonder your parents doted on her so much. She was too excited to wait for our answers and kept talking to herself. A prince was someone common people like us could never approach in a lifetime. Yet because of Li Yunzhen, someone as exalted as he was, had deigned to set foot on our lowly patch of ground and enter our shabby courtyard. It was an unimaginable honor, but I could not smile. The day Li Yunzhen gained real power would be the end of second sister and me. Even when she possessed neither status nor influence, she had not treated us as human. Once she rose, she would treat us like dogs. Zhao Jingxiao was no decent man either. Put a madman and a madwoman together, and the 2 of them would tear our lives apart. Then there was Song Qingyuan. On the surface, he had escaped calamity, but Zhao Jingxiao had already beaten Gunyanzhang and vented some of his rage. Until he had beaten Song Qingyuan as well, the rest of that rage would not subside. To sever herself completely from Song Qingyuan, Li Yunzhen would certainly join our parents in forcing me to marry him. But why? Why should I take the man she discarded? Why must I be sacrificed for her? Because of Li Yunzhen, was I not worthy of a clean love and a husband devoted entirely to me? I tossed and turned through the night. Near dawn I finally drifted into a shallow sleep, only to be awakened soon afterward by gongs and drums. Song Qingyuan had come to propose marriage to me. He had hired a matchmaker and observed every formality with meticulous care. Our parents were eager to agree. Both sides conversed cheerfully and everyone appeared delighted. No one considered my wishes. Just like that, they presumed to arrange my entire life. I refused to accept it. I did not return home. There was no point. Instead, I waited on a road Song Qingyuan would have to take when leaving. Before long I saw him. When he noticed me, he forced a smile onto his dejected face. "Eldest Miss Li, I am thirsty," I said calmly. "Young Master Song, will you invite me to drink tea?" Once we entered a private room at the tea house, I turned and slapped him hard across the face. He held his cheek and looked at me in silence. "I know I implicated you," he said. But in that situation, I only wanted to survive. Besides, you already knew Li Yunzhen had one foot in 3 boats. That is why you deliberately sent word to make me go there, was it not? You wanted to ruin your sister, but instead harmed me and yourself. You were too clever for your own good. If I bear blame, so do you. This was exactly why I did not wish to be a good person. There were always those who, after receiving another's help, turned around and bit the hand that saved them. I closed my eyes and said coldly, "Do you know why I went to find you? Because all 3 of you came to my home to propose marriage." Li Yunzhen feared exposure, so she urged our parents to force second sister and me to marry in her place. I was to marry you, and second sister was to marry Prince Rong. Since Prince Rong had already forced Li Yunzhen and taken her chastity, she also wanted second sister to sleep with Gu Nianzhang and conceal her own loss of virginity. She is vile. She wanted to destroy us. Exposing her was perfectly justified. At first I believed you were innocent. Now I think you deserved what happened. You are unworthy of anyone's help. Whoever saves you will meet misfortune. You and Li Yunzhen are the same kind of wretch concerned only with yourselves, completely indifferent to whether anyone else lives or dies. Song Qingyuan watched me rage without speaking. After a long time he said, "I know I implicated you, but I only wanted to live. Not everyone has Gu Nianzhang's courage. Besides, you know nothing of Prince Rong or what kind of man he is. Once you understand, you will make the same choice I did. I admit that I am a coward, but I am not a villain. I wronged you, and I will compensate you. Think carefully about the marriage. Prince Rong will not spare me, and Li Yunzhen will not spare you. Marrying me is your best way out." He spoke decisively, but he had described himself incorrectly. Perhaps he was no hypocritical gentleman, but he was certainly a genuine scoundrel. I laughed coldly. "I have plenty of other ways out. Before reaching your home that day, I knocked on the doors of every neighbor nearby. They all know that you and I were strangers. I can go before the county authorities, shave my head, become a nun, and make this entire matter public. Prince Rong will learn that you lied to him, and everyone will know what a despicable scoundrel you are. Even if marriage becomes unavoidable, I can beg Gu Nianzhang to form a false marriage with me. He was the man Li Yunzhen most wished to marry. If I marry him instead, it will cut even deeper into her heart. Besides, Gu Nianzhang is a good person. At least I could live with peace of mind beside a good person. He is also a licensed scholar with recognized status. Prince Rong has already vented his anger on him, so marrying him would keep me safe from further revenge. But beside a poisonous snake, I would have to guard constantly against being bitten. Why do you think you are my only way out? You are the one who has none." I turned to leave. Song Qingyuan sprang up and blocked me. "What exactly do you want? Did you stop me today merely to say these things?" "I came to discuss cooperation," I said coldly. "But if you continue behaving as though you are bestowing charity upon me, there is nothing to discuss. You can go die, and I will become a nun. We will go our separate ways." Humiliation showed on Song Qingyuan's face as one emotion after another crossed his features. At last he stepped back, drew a deep breath, and bowed deeply. "Eldest Miss Li, I apologize. I was wrong. I should not have treated you with such discourtesy, and I should never have looked down on you. I want to live. I beg you to save me." I looked at him. "I may help you. How will you repay me? More importantly, we must agree on where we stand. Li Yunzhen is the one at fault. She should never have used my name to court you, and she should never have devised the vicious plan of substituting brides. In this matter, both you and I are innocent. She is now about to enter Prince Rong's household and will soon possess power. You are a stain upon her past, so she will never tolerate you. She abandoned you once and tried to force me to marry you in her place. She can abandon you a second time. Do not dream that she still has feelings for you. If she truly does, that will be the day she dies. As for me, she will certainly hate me for exposing her deeds. Yet she will also be grateful. Without me, she would have married a poor scholar rather than a noble prince. The person she most wishes dead now is you. But I hate her, and I will help you. We are the ones on the same side. We should join forces. I expect you to remember that forever and not waver merely because someone whispers a few words to you." That day, we reached an agreement. Every item in the betrothal gift Song Qingyuan sent to my family would belong to me, not to the Li household. He would deal with my parents himself. As compensation, he gave me farmland and a shop under my sole ownership. Those were separate from the betrothal gifts. The gifts were the condition of my marrying him. The land and shop compensated me for his false accusation. They were 2 different matters. He and I would be husband and wife in name only. He had once held Li Yunzhen's hand and courted her. I would not sincerely spend my life with a man who had been entangled with my own sister. After we passed through this crisis, we would divorce. From then on, he could marry whom he wished and I could marry whom I wished, with no further connection. Song Qingyuan did not hesitate. He signed a divorce agreement immediately. In his heart, he probably hated me intensely as well. From beginning to end, we did not say much about Prince Rong, yet we both understood that as long as he continued to favor Li Yunzhen, neither of us could live in peace. After the agreement was completed and Song Qingyuan departed, I drained an entire pot of tea before I could finally breathe a sigh of relief. I sat in a daze for a while, reviewed every term in my mind, and only then gathered myself and returned home. Another fierce battle awaited me there. Our parents were surrounding Li Yunzhen and attending to her every need. Prince Rong had sent countless betrothal gifts of gold, silver, jewels, and precious objects. He had also stationed maidservants and guards outside her room. The room second sister and I had shared was taken over and turned into an annex for Li Yunzhen. Our parents' eyes shone as they stared at the gifts. They were busy entertaining neighbors who came to flatter them. It was the proudest moment of their lives. When they saw me, a rare trace of guilt passed over their faces, but it vanished quickly. They casually ordered me to receive the guests. I ignored them and walked straight into our parents' bedroom. If my room no longer existed, and they still expected me to marry Song Qingyuan, then they could endure the inconvenience themselves. I threw their bedding outside, took a new set from the cupboard, spread it for myself, and slept soundly to recover my strength. When second sister returned from the shop, I told her to sleep while I got up and prepared. By evening, our parents had finally finished entertaining. Seeing their bedding outside, they pounded furiously on the door. The noise disturbed the maidservants in Li Yunzhen's courtyard. One frowned and ordered them to keep quiet so they would not disturb Prince Rong's favored concubine. Our parents bent at the waist, bowed their heads, and smiled apologetically. The moment they turned away, they found a saw and prepared to cut through the door bar. After struggling for a long time, they finally forced their way inside. I was sitting upright and waiting for them. A vegetable cleaver lay beside my right hand. On my left sat second sister, her face solemn. She knew a difficult battle was coming, and her thin back was perfectly straight. I lifted the cleaver and stared coldly at them. Father recoiled behind mother and demanded in a low voice, "What exactly do you intend to do?" I sneered. "Sign papers severing our relationship." I took out several sheets and spread them flat on the table. Our parents froze, then became angry. Not daring to vent their fury on me, they turned on second sister. "Why are you standing there? Take that knife from your elder sister." Second sister did not move. Slowly, she drew a pair of scissors from her sleeve, the largest pair in the shop, perfectly suited to stabbing someone. Our parents stared. Mother immediately panicked and burst into tears. "What do you two want? Our family has finally received such wonderful news. Are you determined to ruin everything? Your younger sister will become a princess consort. Would it not be wonderful for you to share in her good fortune?" I laughed coldly inside. Would we truly share any fortune? I did not believe it. Perhaps even our parents would receive no lasting glory from Prince Rong, and would instead be dragged down by him. That day, Song Qingyuan had told me much about Prince Rong to prove his sincerity. Prince Rong had been banished to Huzhou. He had caused trouble in the capital, and not even his mother, a favored imperial consort, could protect him. He had been sent here in disgrace. His enemies had followed him, which was why he had been attacked, drugged, and eventually entangled with Li Yunzhen. My instincts told me this was not a blessing. At first, I had intended to leave our parents a way out. I would explain the dangers, repay the debt of birth and upbringing, and then wipe the slate clean forever. But after returning and seeing wealth blind them completely, I realized that some people cannot be awakened by words. Only pain can force them to understand danger. So I changed my mind and prepared the severance papers. "The documents are ready," I said. "You need only sign them." They refused, not because they could not bear to lose us, but because 2 pieces of meat they had spent years fattening were trying to run away before they could be sold for a good price. They believed themselves cheated. I sneered. "Sign the papers, and from this day forward we will have nothing to do with one another. I will also keep Li Yunzhen's affairs secret. Refuse, and I will tell everyone that Li Yunzhen had 1 foot in 3 boats, making sure she cannot even enter Prince Rong's residence as a concubine." "You are causing chaos." Father slammed his hand on the table. I slowly lifted the cleaver, signed. They threatened me, tried to coax me and wept and wailed, but I did not waver. The previous day, when father tried to make Gu Nianzhang claim that second sister was the woman who had carried on with him in secret, the last of our familial affection had ended. I did not need relatives who might stab me in the back at any moment. In the end, our parents signed. One of Li Yunzhen's maidservants came again to ask why this side of the house was so noisy. Gritting their teeth, they wrote their names and threw down the brush. "I have no unfilial daughter like you," father said. They believed those words would wound us. They were clever enough to know that we had once cared. That was why they used such a weapon. But we no longer cared, and that realization frightened them instead. I put the document safely away and pulled second sister toward the door. Mother's eyes filled with tears. "Yunlan, do you truly no longer want your parents?" The last trace of familial feeling I still had for them made me offer one final warning. "Even if you follow Li Yunzhen to the capital someday, do not sell the shop here, and do not allow her to become Prince Rong's princess consort. If she remains only his concubine, the two of you will not be counted among Prince Rong's 9 clans and subjected to collective punishment. Should disaster fall, you may avoid being implicated. People must understand their own limits and abilities." It was the last time I spoke to them without anger. In truth, resentment had long existed between us. They poured all their bitterness over failing to have a son, and over their unsatisfactory lives onto us. We resented their injustice, volatile tempers, and insistence that we bear the misery of their fate. Yet, no matter how much I resented them, I had never wished to take their lives. The bond between us simply ended there. 2 days later, Prince Rong sent a small sedan chair to take Li Yunzhen away. Song Qingyuan and I also married in haste. He added another portion to the betrothal gifts given to my parents, so that I could depart from the Li household and preserve at least a little dignity for both sides. I bought a small courtyard for second sister. From then on, it would be her home. I also gave her half the shop. She could marry if she wished or remain unmarried. She could take a husband into her own household or live alone. Whatever she chose, no one would ever again treat her marriage as an extra item offered to compensate someone else. The night before my wedding, second sister offered to take my place, but I refused. She was too kind. If she entered the Song family, sooner or later Song Qingyuan would bully her to death. She was the last family I had in this world. I had witnessed every hardship she had endured. I wanted only for her to be happy. On our wedding night, Song Qingyuan spread bedding on the floor of my room. We did not speak. He did not lift my bridal veil, and we did not drink the ceremonial wedding wine. We were two strangers cooperating in a performance. On the customary third-day visit to the bride's family, I did not return. I heard our parents had even prepared a banquet that day. When I failed to appear, they flew into a rage. They thought I had merely spoken in anger. How could a daughter truly reject her parents? When I heard, I only gave a cold smile. Sooner or later they would learn to face my anger as something real. I thought for a long time, then decided that second sister should go to the capital to open a shop and quietly investigate Prince Rong. She should not have had to undertake such a task, but I could not trust anyone else. Second sister immediately agreed. Eldest sister, you always stood in front of me before. I often regretted that I could not be as strong as you. This is the first time I can truly help you. I want to go. This is something I am good at, and I can do it well. She left for the capital and sent letters home as soon as she gathered news. Prince Rong had beaten someone to death in the capital during a petty rivalry. An imperial censor impeached him, and he was ultimately forced into exile in Huzhou. His reputation in the capital had always been poor. Only because his mother was a favored imperial consort had he escaped harsher punishment, but he had made many enemies, and plenty of people in the capital wished him dead. After being sent to Huzhou, Prince Rong not only failed to repent, he remained as carefree and unrestrained as before, perhaps even more so. No one here could control him. There was not even an imperial censor in all Huzhou bold enough to impeach him. That would not do. He had come here to be punished. How could punishment become a life of pleasure? He ought to return to the capital as quickly as possible. Only there could anyone restrain him. I asked Song Qingyuan whether he could inform Consort Ru that Prince Rong had nearly married in Huzhou. He fell silent. You still refuse to let your younger sister go. I laughed in Inkin. Here, no one can restrain Prince Rong. Killing you would be as easy as crushing an ant. Do you think that because he has not acted yet, he has forgiven you? His relationship with Li Yunzhen is still new, and he is still captivated by her. Wait until the two of them quarrel. Then see upon whom Prince Rong vents his anger. I know Li Yunzhen too well. She will never live quietly. She and Prince Rong will fight noisily, reconcile separate, and reconcile again. If he were reasonable, he would be angry only with her, but he is a madman. He will lash out at everyone nearby. No one can predict who will suffer. Song Qingyuan remained silent for a while, then finally acted. Not long afterward, someone arrived from the capital with word that Consort Ru was gravely ill and orders for Prince Rong to return immediately. He received the message and at once packed his belongings, preparing to ride day and night back to the capital. The day before he departed, Li Yunzhen deliberately took a detour to my shop. Smiling smugly, she said, "I want to buy some local specialties to take to the capital as gifts. Eldest sister, would it not have been better if you had obeyed my arrangement from the start? In the end, you still married Song Qingyuan. Why put yourself through so much trouble?" Of course it was different. Had I not fought back, I would have become her accomplice, helping her deceive and harm Song Qingyuan. Who would willingly stand on the same side as someone so vile? Besides, by struggling, I had secured tangible benefits. Expecting remorse from those people? Only a ghost would believe that. But there was no point debating with a fool. "What will father and mother do after you leave?" I asked. "Second sister and I have severed our relationship with them. In name, you are now their only daughter. Will you simply abandon them?" Her expression flickered, as though our parents were obstacles standing between her and the good life she wanted. "My parents do not need an outsider like you to meddle. Worry about yourself." She bought nothing. After criticizing me, she strutted away. 2 days later, Prince Rong's entire household set out for the capital. Li Yunzhen did not take our parents. She said she would send for them once she had settled down. As for when, they would have to wait for her message. When I heard, I merely said, "Oh, twice." They would be waiting a very long time. Before long, second sister sent news from the capital. Consort Ru had never been ill. She had pretended sickness to make the emperor worry over her and issue an imperial edict recalling Prince Rong. She also intended to arrange his marriage to a noble daughter from an established family in the capital, and had already begun considering candidates. Second sister could learn nothing about Li Yunzhen. There was no such person in Prince Rong's residence. Li Yunzhen had been hidden away. Perhaps she had gone from being his concubine to a hidden mistress kept outside the household. I thought for a long time, then sent the information to our parents. For so many years, they had cherished Li Yunzhen as the apple of their eye. They had not hesitated to betray their other 2 daughters, and through her, they had obtained enough wealth to live comfortably through the latter half of their lives. Whether they still wished to save their only remaining daughter was for them to decide. To my surprise, they truly went to the capital. On their first day there, they visited Prince Rong's residence to ask after Li Yunzhen, only to be beaten and driven away. They found temporary lodging. In the middle of the night, they were secretly attacked, loaded into a carriage, and thrown into the countryside beyond the capital. Their attackers warned that they must never enter the capital again and should return home immediately. Every coin they carried was taken. Weeping, penniless, and wretched, they began the long journey home on foot. Yet they still possessed a measure of luck. They encountered Gu Nianzhang. He had passed the provincial civil service examination and was now traveling to the capital for the metropolitan examination. The 3 met on the road. Our parents wore torn clothes and looked filthy and miserable. Gu Nianzhang was dressed in fine brocade, refined and dignified, surrounded by people flattering him. Anyone could see that his future was bright. 6 eyes met and for a moment no one could speak. In the end, Gu Nianzhang was still kind. He asked what had happened, then concealed our parents in the carriage of the scholars traveling to the capital for the examination, helping them evade the surveillance of Prince Rong's household. Afterward, he told them to strike the drum of appeals. By then, second sister and I had reunited in the capital. When our parents struck the drum of appeals, we stood among the crowd and watched. According to procedure, a petitioner had to endure 30 blows of the staff before the complaint would be heard. Father received all 30. Mother knelt and recounted the entire matter from beginning to end. They had only one demand. They wanted to see their daughter Li Yunzhen alive, or see her body if she was dead. An imperial censor seized the opportunity to impeach Prince Rong again. In Huzhou, Prince Rong had abused local men and women, beaten a licensed scholar, abducted a common woman, interfered arbitrarily in marriages, and accepted bribes. Every offense was reported to the throne. Song Qingyuan and I had contributed to that result. We had spent enormous manpower and resources gathering evidence and placing it in the censor's hands, waiting only for Prince Rong to leave Huzhou so the claims could be verified and presented to the emperor. Consort Ru and Prince Rong had no alternative but to let Li Yunzhen appear. They acknowledged that she was Prince Rong's concubine. They claimed she had accidentally miscarried and had remained inside recuperating, which was why she had not met anyone. Our parents finally saw her. Countless people watched their meeting. Li Yunjin's lips trembled. None of her old arrogance or willfulness remained. Her complexion was waxy and sallow. She had lost a great deal of weight, and from time to time she clutched her abdomen. She had been forced to drink medicine. She did not know what it was. She only knew that she had miscarried and would never be able to bear children again. Her abdomen ached constantly, and the bleeding never stopped. She felt utterly ruined. The Li Yunzhen, who had once run and jumped freely, seemed no more than a dream. Neither she nor our parents dared speak. They only looked at one another through tear-filled eyes. Afterward, our parents were detained in Prince Rong's residence. Consort Ru feared they would continue speaking outside, so she simply locked all three together. Their days there were anything but happy. Someone we had bribed secretly reported that the three lived in terror every day, afraid they might suddenly be poisoned to death. Prince Rong finally received his retribution. He was stripped of his title, reduced to a commoner, and confined in a ruined residence in the capital. Li Yunzhen was held there with him, and neither could leave freely. His mother was implicated as well. She was demoted to the low rank of talented lady and sent to live in the cold palace. Everything seemed finally to have settled. The day our parents were thrown out of Prince Rong's residence, second sister and I sold our shop in the capital and prepared to return to Huzhou. Huzhou was less prosperous, but it was our homeland, a place we knew. We still wanted to go back. At the city gate, we encountered our parents. They had not a single coin and were begging, only to be driven away. Sitting inside our carriage and watching them, we could only feel how bleak and fickle worldly fortunes could be. They had basked in triumph for only a short time before falling this far, yet I had not expected them to stand up and demand justice for Li Yunzhen. It was fortunate that they had, otherwise I truly would have been unable to regard them as human. I sent a shop assistant over to throw them a string of coins. It was enough for them to make their way back to Huzhou on foot, but nowhere near enough for a journey by carriage or boat. I lowered the curtain and told the driver to continue. Second sister asked, "Will we not take them back with us?" She was still soft-hearted. I shook my head. Let them suffer a little, perhaps they will finally learn some sense. We returned to Huzhou. After arriving, I took out the divorce agreement, went with Song Qingyuan to the authorities to register it, and moved out of the Song household. News of Prince Rong's fall spread through Huzhou and everyone applauded. Song Qingyuan and I were both safe. When he received the officially sealed divorce document, he looked dazed. "Did you truly dislike marrying me that much? Am I really so terrible?" I smiled and slapped him across the face once more. "You should consider yourself fortunate that you merely burdened me with a false accusation. A payment of compensation settled the matter. Had you offended me as seriously as Prince Rong did," I did not finish. I only glared at him coldly. He fled in alarm. As he fled, he shouted, "Of everyone in your family, you are the craziest." I laughed coldly. Without becoming a little mad, how could anyone survive? In a family like ours, how could normal people possibly be raised? Afterward, second sister and I worked diligently to manage our shop. I set myself a new goal: drive Song Qingyuan's business into bankruptcy as soon as possible, so he would finally understand exactly how terrible he was. Second sister became far more confident after everything she had experienced in the capital. At last, she understood that she was not inferior. At a critical moment, she could step forward and carry a heavy responsibility. Many people could never do even that. She was no less capable than anyone else. On the contrary, she was extraordinarily capable. Not everyone can see virtues beyond physical beauty, but she no longer cared what the world thought of her. She knew who she was, and that was enough. That was our little story. Several months later, our parents finally returned to Huzhou. They supported each other as they walked. So thin they were little more than skin and bones. Their clothes were torn and they looked like a pair of beggars. When they returned to their little courtyard, they discovered that almost nothing remained. Before leaving for the capital, they had feared thieves and sold every valuable object, exchanging the money for banknotes they could carry. In the capital, all of it had been stolen. Only the shop remained. They had remembered my warning and had not sold it. Unexpectedly, it had become their sole remaining property. Fortunately, they had never formally become Prince Rong's in-laws. Otherwise, they would have been counted among Prince Rong's 9 clans and subjected to collective punishment. Their property would have been confiscated along with his. The realization terrified them. After the fear came desolation. The household that had once been noisy and lively now contained only the 2 of them. Yet this had once been a family of 5. Ordinarily, it should gradually have grown into a large family. During festivals, daughters, sons-in-law, grandsons, and granddaughters should have returned to visit. Now all of it was gone. 2 daughters had severed their relationship with them. 1 daughter was confined. In the end, they had only each other. They wept bitterly, like 2 dogs abandoned by fate, but they could blame no one. They had brought everything upon themselves. They had sown the seeds of favoritisms, so naturally those seeds could never grow into a straight tree. Sooner or later, favoritism would pull that tree down, and when it fell, it would strike them with all its weight. That was their fate. Thank you for supporting Panda. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring you more amazing stories. Now, let's begin story 2. My husband pretended to be crippled. I pretended to be ugly, and neither of us saw through the other for 3 years. The water in the bronze basin had gone cold for the 3rd time. I knelt on the floor, wrung out the cloth, and pressed it against Shenzihao's calf. He sat in a black lacquered wooden wheelchair, eyes half closed, his face gaunt and drained of life. Young madam, that medicinal oil smells far too strong. Nanny's son stood beyond the threshold, covering her nose with one hand and openly sneering. I have already counted the allowance sent by the household office. This is all there is. If you think it is too little, take it up with the chief steward yourself. She tossed a nearly empty silk pouch onto the table. Several coins struck the wood with a sharp, grating clatter. I did not look up. How much? Shenzihao asked evenly. Nanny's son stiffened, then immediately bent at the waist in a show of respect. Prime Minister, prices have risen this month and every household must cut expenses. The household office truly. I asked how much. 8 taels. 8 taels? He asked nothing more. He lowered his eyes, his thin hands resting loosely on the arms of his wheelchair, as though he lacked even the strength to become angry. For all its grandeur, the Prime Minister's residence received an allowance of only 8 taels a month. Last year it had been 32, and the year before that, 50. Seeing that he did not pursue the matter, Nanny's son grew even bolder. She glanced at the half of my face hidden behind a veil and gave a contemptuous laugh. Young madam, dinner is ready outside in the corridor. This old servant is too old to carry it so far. Fetch it yourself. I rose and went into the corridor. There were 2 bowls of porridge and 1 plate of pickled vegetables. The porridge was already cold, with a thin gray-white film across its surface. I lifted the lid and a sour, spoiled smell hit me. I carried the bowls back into the room and set them on the table. He glanced at them without speaking. I turned and poured both bowls away. From the cabinet I took the dry rations and pickles I had hidden, then heated a kettle over the small stove and made 2 bowls of simple noodle soup that were at least edible. Make do with this. I handed him a bowl. He accepted it and lowered his head to take a sip. Through the steam, he looked at me with gentle regret. Wanjing, I am sorry you have had to endure this. I am not aggrieved. You married into the Prime Minister's residence 3 years ago, lived on bran and vegetables with me, and endured endless contempt. He set down his bowl and sighed. If not for the betrothal arranged by your father long ago, you would never have been reduced to. I said I am not aggrieved. I cut him off, crouched down, and continued wiping his legs. Do they still hurt? Only an old condition. It is nothing. I lowered my head and pressed along his leg from the knee downward. Beneath the cloth, I quietly circulated my strength, sending a fine thread of inner energy through his meridians. They were unobstructed. His blood and energy were abundant, and his bones were strong. These were not the legs of a man who had been paralyzed for 5 years. My hand paused for a heartbeat. Then I withdrew my inner energy as though nothing had happened, and continued washing his legs with warm water. He reached out and stroked my hair. His low voice sounded tired. Once the larger situation is settled, I will find birthmark can be cured. I lowered my eyes and did not answer. His hand was warm with long slender fingers and only a thin layer of calluses. Those were not calluses worn by brushwork. They came from holding a sword. He thought I did not know, and he did not know that the ugly red mark, covering half my face, was only a disguise I painted on every morning, with a specially prepared medicinal paste. The water in the basin had gone completely cold. I carried it toward the door, and a soft cough sounded behind me. I did not turn around. I only looked into the bronze mirror. He was watching my back intently. The gentleness from moments ago had vanished, leaving only guarded scrutiny. A moment later, he lowered his eyes again and resumed the familiar appearance of a sickly prime minister. I stepped into the courtyard and threw out the dirty water. Moonlight silvered the spreading puddle. Nanny's son approached from the far end of the corridor carrying a kettle of hot water. She deliberately brushed close to me, tipped the kettle, and splashed scalding water onto the hem of my skirt. Oh, forgive me, young madam. This old servant's hand slipped. She smiled as she performed the lie. Your skirt was already old, it is hardly worth regretting. The hot water soaked through the cloth and burned my calf. I looked down at the dark stain on my skirt. It is fine, I replied calmly. Just be more careful next time, Nanny. Nanny's son snorted and swaggered away with the kettle. Only after she disappeared did I lift my skirt. My calf was bright red, with small blisters beginning to rise. I pressed the burn, used inner energy to disperse the pooled blood beneath the skin, lowered my skirt, and returned to the room. From the other side of the folding screen came my husband's steady breathing. I lay on the bed, stared at the peeling paint on the ceiling, and counted each breath. He was not asleep. His breathing was too even, deliberately even. I turned toward the wall and closed my eyes. In this residence he was acting, and so was I. He believed I was a weak, submissive, ugly woman who allowed others to bully her. I believed he was a powerless cripple. For 3 years, separated by a single folding screen, we had politely maintained a marriage that existed in name alone. He did not know who I was, and I was not certain who he was. But I knew one thing. Tomorrow, Nanny's son would repay every tael she had stolen from our allowance, with interest. Not today. Today, I still had to play the meek Madame Shen. The night deepened, and the breathing beyond the screen remained perfectly even. I held the silver needle hidden in my sleeve and closed my eyes. At the third watch, I opened them. At last, the breathing behind the screen had become heavier, with the faint snore of someone truly asleep. Nothing like the carefully controlled rhythm he maintained during the day. I waited a little longer. Once I was certain he was asleep, I lifted the blanket and sat up. I did not use the door. Pressing my palm to the window frame, I released the latch with inner energy without making a sound. I slipped through the window and touched down on the eaves. Moonlight spread over the roof tiles, and the entire Prime Minister's residence lay in suffocating silence. I changed into fitted black clothing and put on an iron half-mask. Beneath it, my eyes were cold in the moonlight. I was Wan Xing, Shen Zihao's wife, the ugly lady of the Prime Minister's household, who let others humiliate her. But under another identity, I was the master of Wuxiang Pavilion, which operated the realm's greatest intelligence network. From military affairs on the northern frontier to grain routes along the southern border, from secret letters held by Buddhist temples, to whispers inside the imperial palace, wherever people existed, Wuxiang Pavilion had eyes and ears. My objective that night was simple: intercept the secret letter, proving that the second prince, Zhao Heng, had embezzled revenue from the salt and iron taxes. The letter had been sent from Lingnan and rushed toward the capital, over 800 li. It would change hands once in a hidden chamber at Prince Longqing's residence. I had to stop the courier before he entered the manor. From the Prime Minister's residence to Prince Longqing's residence, it took less than half an incense stick to cross the rooftops with lightness skill. I landed in an old pagoda tree in the rear alley of the prince's residence, steadied my breathing, and watched both ends of the lane. The courier had not arrived. I leaned against the trunk and waited for about the time needed to drink a cup of tea. Rapid hoofbeats sounded at the end of the alley. A man in gray leaped from his horse, clutching a black bamboo tube to his chest. I was about to move when a dark figure dropped from the opposite roof, one step faster than me. The black iron sword in his hand drove straight toward the courier's throat. The courier cried out and dropped the bamboo tube. The black-clad figure seized it in one clean motion. I frowned. Someone had acted before me, but the letter could not fall into another person's hands. I sprang from the tree with 2 silver needles between my fingers and sent them toward the stranger's wrist. They cut through the air almost soundlessly, yet he still twisted aside and swept them away with his sword. "Who are you?" His voice was low and deliberately altered. I did not answer. I closed to within 3 feet, feinted with my left hand, drew the flexible sword hidden in my sleeve with my right, and thrust toward his eyes. He reacted faster than expected. His black iron sword rose and struck mine hard. The force traveled through the blade and numbed the web between my thumb and forefinger. His strength was considerable. I retreated half a step and reassessed him. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed entirely in black, with a mask covering his face. Only his eyes showed, sharp beneath the moonlight. We studied each other for less than a breath. He attacked first. His opening strike fell with crushing force. I turned to let my flexible blade slide along the spine of his sword, and aimed for his throat. His second strike changed direction with startling speed and drove toward my chest. I leaned backward until my body was nearly parallel to the ground. The tip passed over me and severed one tie on my black outfit. On the third exchange, he suddenly checked his sword, stopping the point 3 inches from my shoulder. I realized he had noticed something and was studying my movement technique. My lightness technique belonged exclusively to Wuxiang Pavilion, and had been taught to me personally by the former pavilion master. No more than 3 people in the world knew it. He had recognized it. I withdrew my flexible sword and stepped back 3 paces. At that moment, the scent of pine needles drifted through the bitter fragrance of medicinal herbs. It was far too familiar. Every night, separated by one folding screen, I smelled that scent from the pine needle salve my husband used during his medicinal baths. My hands went cold. The masked man gave me no more time to think. He tucked the bamboo tube into his robe and vanished into the night. I stood watching him go and did not follow. It was not because I could not catch him. I simply did not dare. If I caught him, tore away his mask, and found that the man beneath it truly was, I forced the thought down. About 7 or 8 minutes later, I returned through the window, changed out of the black outfit, hid the flexible sword and silver needles, and lay back on the bed. The other side of the folding screen was unusually quiet. After listening for a long time, I heard a cough suppressed almost into silence, as though someone had covered his mouth. My fingers tightened beneath the blanket. That third strike in the alley. He had not withdrawn it because he recognized my technique. He had withdrawn it because otherwise his blade would have pierced my shoulder. He had chosen not to hurt me. Why would one masked stranger spare another? Unless he knew me. A short, heavier cough sounded beyond the screen, as though something had caught in his throat. "Husband," I called. "Are you still awake?" Several breaths passed before he answered in a drowsy voice. "I had a nightmare. Did I disturb you?" "No." I tugged the blanket higher. "Rest early, husband. Sleep well." The room fell silent again, and his breathing returned to that unnaturally even rhythm. I stared at the ceiling beams and remained awake until near dawn. Near dawn, I finally closed my eyes, but the scent of pine needle salve and the black iron sword stopping 3 inches from my shoulder still circled through my mind. The next morning, the gate of the Prime Minister's residence was kicked open from outside quite literally by a boot. The boot was trimmed in gold and embroidered with a flying tiger, the unmistakable emblem of the second prince, Zhao Heng. No one else in the capital would dare tread a flying tiger beneath his feet. More than 20 fully armed guards followed Zhao Heng inside. Every man wore a menacing expression, hands resting on sword hilts. The clatter of armor made the morning air feel even harsher. I was spreading medicinal herbs in the courtyard. At the noise, I instinctively stepped forward, then caught myself, retreated and lowered my head in feigned panic. "Shenzihao." Zhao Heng's voice rang from the front hall, sharp and shrill as a rusted blade scraping stone. "Get out here!" I set down the herb tray and hurried toward the hall. Shenzihao had already been pushed out in his wheelchair. He wore a faded blue robe, washed, almost colorless. Its loose collar exposed his thin collarbones. His face looked even more exhausted than usual, dark shadows beneath his eyes as though he had not slept all night. "Your Highness honors us with a visit." He inclined himself slightly. His voice was calm and not at all servile, though it remained weak. "May I ask what I have done to displease your Highness?" Zhao Heng did not answer. He kicked the wheel of the chair. The wheelchair tipped sharply. Shenzihao was thrown from it, his shoulder striking the stone steps before he rolled into the mud below. A cut opened at his brow, and blood ran down onto the gray stone. "Prime Minister." I rushed to kneel beside him and tried to help him up. Zhao Heng stood on the steps, looking down with a cruel smile. "Last night, my courier was attacked in the alley behind Prince Longqing's residence, and the bamboo tube disappeared. He's descended and planted his boot on the hem of Shenzihao's robe. Who in this capital dares touch my people?" He lay in the mud and began coughing violently. He coughed so hard that blood came up, leaving a red stain in the mud before him. "Your Highness." He raised his head. Blood from the cut at his brow streaked his cheek, leaving him looking utterly wretched. "My legs are useless and I can barely protect myself. How could I intercept a courier? I cannot even leave my own gate." Zhao Heng crouched and gripped Shenzihao's chin between 2 fingers, turning his face from side to side. "You have a point. What can a cripple do?" He stood, dusted off his hands and turned to me, his eyes fixed on my veil with interest. "Not bad." He raised his riding crop and lifted one corner of my veil. The dark red mark covering the left half of my face was exposed. "Shenzihao, your ugly wife may not have a face worth seeing, but her figure is acceptable." I lowered my head and hunched my shoulders as though terrified. "How about this?" Zhao Heng withdrew his crop and grinned at Shenzihao. "Give this ugly woman to me as a maid to serve in my chambers, and I will stop investigating the courier. What do you say?" Shenzihao lay in the mud without speaking. Zhao Heng waited, and when no answer came, his smile slowly turned cold. "Shenzihao, I am speaking to you, your Highness." He lifted his head. His face was smeared with blood and mud, but his voice remained steady. My humble wife may not be beautiful, but she is my lawful wife, properly married into my household. If your highness forces a court official to surrender his wife, word may spread and damage the imperial family's reputation. Zhao Heng's face darkened. Are you lecturing me? I would not dare. I am only concerned for your highness's reputation. Zhao Heng looked down at my mud-covered husband with open disgust. He jerked his chin toward his deputy commander. Strip that ugly woman. I want to see whether Prime Minister Shen truly cares about my reputation or merely cannot bear to part with his wife. The deputy commander obeyed and strode toward me, one rough hand reaching for my collar. I remained kneeling beside him with my head lowered. My right hand was hidden inside my sleeve, 3 silver needles coated with numbing medicine held between thumb and forefinger. If I wished, those 3 needles could seal the deputy commander's acupoints and drop him motionless to the ground. But I did not act. At the edge of my vision, his right hand rested on the arm of the overturned wheelchair. His fingers dug into the wood, his nails nearly biting into the rosewood grain. A dry crack sounded. The armrest split beneath his palm. He was enduring it, pouring all his will into suppressing his rage. He still kept his head lowered, his face half hidden by blood and mud, looking no different from a powerless man trampled into the ground. Yet beneath that appearance, killing intent had been compressed to its limit. If the deputy commander's hand moved another inch, or Zhao Heng spoke one more word, he would reveal every hidden card he had protected for 5 years and overturn the entire board. No, not now. The deputy commander's fingers touched the first fastening at my collar. I raised my head, my voice choking with tears. It was the weak and helpless act I had perfected over 3 years. Your Highness, spare me. I have a diseased sore on my face. I fear the sickness may spread to your Highness. Please show mercy. As I spoke, I tore away my veil and exposed the frightening dark red mark across the left half of my face. Under the candlelight, my elaborate medicinal paste disguise looked inflamed and diseased. I had even created cloudy lines across it to make the effect more convincing. When he saw my face clearly, the deputy commander recoiled 2 steps and wiped his hand in disgust. Zhao Heng also frowned. He studied the ugly mark for a moment, then waved dismissively. Forget it. I would rather not dirty my hands. Before leaving, he kicked my husband once more. Keep your head down if you want to live. Next time, I will not be so lenient. Zhao Heng led his guards away with an arrogant swagger. The hoofbeats faded and the courtyard finally fell silent. I knelt in the mud and looked at my husband who still lay face down on the cold stone. Husband, I called. They are gone. He did not move. Only after a long while did he lift his head. His familiar weak gentleness had returned, as though what had just happened were merely an insignificant humiliation. Wanjing, help me up. I righted the wheelchair, bent down, and helped him sit. His body seemed very light, at least on the surface. But when I put an arm around his waist, I clearly felt the muscles along his spine taut and strong as tempered steel. A man paralyzed for 5 years could not have such a body. Once he was seated securely, I used a cloth to wipe the blood from his face. The wound is not deep. I will fetch medicinal powder. There is no hurry. He caught my wrist with the light grip expected of a truly sick man. Wanjing, I am sorry about today. His Highness is gone. That is what matters. That is not what I mean. He looked directly at me. When he said those things, I could do nothing. I could not even protect you. I lowered my head to avoid his gaze. You need not blame yourself, husband. You have difficulties of your own. I am the Prime Minister, yet I cannot even protect my own wife. He released my wrist and laughed bitterly. You must think I am useless. I remained silent for a moment. I have never thought that. He looked at me. Beneath the gentleness was gratitude, and something else I could not yet understand. I turned to fetch medicine. At the door I slowed and looked back. The rosewood armrest on the right side of the wheelchair had split from top to bottom. Wood nearly as hard as iron had been crushed by his bare hand. I memorized the crack and crossed the threshold. The mud in the courtyard had not dried. My husband's blood had mixed into it, leaving a dark red stain. I stood beneath the corridor and looked up at the painfully blue sky. Second Prince Zhao Heng, today you humiliated my husband and insulted my dignity. You thought you had merely kicked over a wheelchair. In truth, you had kicked loose the lid of your own coffin. You did not know who the 2 people kneeling before you were, but very soon you would. I closed my fingers around the silver needle in my sleeve. My palm was damp, not with fear but with impatience to settle the debt. 3 days later, the bruises still darkened Shen Zihao's knuckles. He pretended not to notice and spent his days in the study, dealing with official documents that court officials had deliberately delayed for half a month before sending to him. His writing hand remained steady, but whenever he changed brushes, the middle and ring fingers of his right hand curled inward from pain. I watched from outside the door for a moment, then returned to my room. From a hidden compartment beneath the wardrobe, I removed a dark reddish-black wooden jar. It contained a salve I had prepared myself from 12 medicinal ingredients to improve circulation and disperse bruising. 3 of them were rare treasures Wuxiang Pavilion had purchased at great expense from the western regions. Applied to the skin, the salve could disperse deep bruising within 4 hours. Combined with massage and inner energy, it worked twice as well, but I could not present it openly. How could the ugly, overlooked lady of the Prime Minister's residence possess such a medicine? I took a rough earthenware bowl, scooped out a lump of salve, added a handful of stove ash from the courtyard, and mixed them together. The original amber salve turned into an ugly gray-black paste that looked no different from mud. I carried the bowl to the study and knocked on the doorframe. "Husband, your hand has not healed yet, has it? I know a remedy a village physician taught me when I was young. It works well for bruises and falls." Shen Zihao looked up from the stack of documents and frowned slightly at the black paste in the bowl. "What is that?" "A folk remedy. It does not have a proper name." I approached, crouched beside his wheelchair, scooped out some paste, warmed it between my palms, and held out my hand. He hesitated, then placed his right hand in mine. I supported it and massaged each knuckle. The salve softened with warmth and released a sharp medicinal scent. The thin calluses on his fingers brushed my palm. "Does it hurt?" "No." He watched my hands. "It only feels warm. I need to press harder. The warmth is what makes it work." I lowered my head and focused on his hand. As I massaged it, I sent a fine thread of inner energy from his wrist along his meridians. A hidden injury still lingered near the radius, the backlash of sword energy from abruptly withdrawing a strike. The direction of the force matched the mark left on my flexible sword exactly. My hands paused for a heartbeat, then continued without revealing anything. "Wan Jing," he suddenly said. "Yes? You have suffered many wrongs because of me." He placed his other hand over the back of mine. His words were more sincere than usual. "Life in this residence has become harder with each passing year. Once the larger situation is settled, I will find the finest physician in the realm to cure the mark on your face. Then you may go wherever you wish. You will not have to remain trapped in this residence." As he spoke, the bronze mirror reflected us directly. The scene in the mirror looked warm. A frail husband in a wheelchair, and his ugly wife crouched at his feet applying medicine, 2 people abandoned by fate relying on each other. Through the mirror I saw him studying the back of my neck, searching for something he wanted to confirm. I avoided his gaze and finished applying the salve. "Husband, you flatter me." I rose and wiped my hands. "I do not care about the mark. As long as you are safe, I am content." He laughed softly and said no more. I carried the bowl from the study. At the corner of the corridor, I slowed. While massaging his hand, I had used the medicine's effects to trace the flow down into his legs. His meridians were open, his blood and energy abundant, and his tendons and bones bore no trace of old injury. I had also quietly released the 2 acupoints, sealed below his knees. Perhaps he did not yet know that I had removed the final chain from his legs. I soaked the earthenware bowl in the kitchen water jar, then returned to my room. From beneath my pillow I took a thin sheet of paper folded into quarters. It marked the locations of secret banks throughout the capital. With a red brush I circled 7 places. All were Zhao Heng's properties, and each year they moved no less than 1 million taels of illicit silver. Although the masked man had taken the secret letter about the salt and iron taxes, Wuxiang Pavilion had traced Zhao Heng's money flows 3 months earlier. The letter was only bait. The banks were his vital point. I wrote 7 secret orders. The wording varied, but the command was the same. Within 3 days, every account book and banknote belonging to those 7 banks had to disappear. They were not to be burned. Using Wuxiang Pavilion's merchant network, we would withdraw each sum through layer after layer of transactions and swallow the entire fortune. By the time Zhao Heng discovered what had happened, his silver would already be in my hands. I sealed the orders and opened the window. A gray pigeon landed on the sill and tilted its head at me. I whistled for 6 more, tied a letter to each bird's leg, and watched them fly toward the setting sun. Before closing the window, I looked toward the study across the courtyard. Candlelight cast his silhouette onto the paper screen. He remained in his wheelchair, head lowered over official documents. His sickly appearance would easily inspire pity in outsiders. I drew the curtain shut. Pity had never existed between us. News that 7 banks had collapsed within 3 days swept through the capital like a cold wind. Zhao Heng flew into a rage, but for all his fury he could not identify the culprit. Wuxiang Pavilion always worked cleanly. Every sum had passed through at least 5 layers of concealment, and on paper, each transfer looked like an ordinary commercial transaction. Unable to find the mastermind, Zhao Heng vented his anger on the easiest target. On the 4th night, 8 men climbed over the rear wall of the Prime Minister's residence. I heard them before I heard footsteps. Anyone capable of scaling that wall knew how to move silently. What reached my ears was the scrape of scabbards against clothing, and the soft suction of boots sinking into damp mud. 2 men hid behind the artificial rockery. 3 moved along the corridor toward the main room. 2 circled toward the kitchen, and 1 climbed onto the roof. I sat embroidering beneath the lamp, every stitch slow and even. From outside, the shadow on the paper screen belonged only to a gentle young wife, but my left hand, resting on my knee, tapped Wuxiang Pavilion's signal. 1 long, 2 short, 1 long, 3 short. In the old pagoda tree beyond the courtyard wall, an ordinary gray sparrow suddenly fluttered its wings, gave 3 brief calls, and flew away. For the time it took to drink a cup of tea, I did nothing. I continued embroidering a branch of red plum blossoms. The stitches were fine and regular, shading each petal from deep crimson to pale pink. A short muffled sound came from behind the rockery, followed by something heavy falling. Along the corridor came a faint metallic scrape, like a blade touching bone. Near the kitchen, only the surface of the water jar trembled. Finally, a roof tile slipped, fell and broke in 2. Then there was no sound at all. From beginning to end, less than half an incense stick passed. All 8 intruders had been dealt with. I set aside the embroidery frame, extinguished the lamp, and lay down. Moonlight entered through the window gap, drawing a narrow white line across the floor. I closed my eyes but continued listening. Movement came from the rear gate. It was not one of Wuxiang Pavilion's people. The footsteps were heavier, and the measured rhythm of boots on stone revealed disciplined training. It was Shen Zihao's personal guard, the quiet young man who always stood behind his wheelchair. He was disposing of the bodies with practiced efficiency. I heard the intermittent scrape of a shovel and smelled powdered lime used to erase bloodstains and mask the smell of bodies. By the time everything was finished, dawn had begun to pale the sky. I rose, washed, cooked porridge, sliced a plate of pickles, and carried breakfast to the front hall. Shen Zihao was already seated at the table, looking as composed as ever. In fact, he seemed more energetic than the day before, a warm cup of tea in his hand. "Good morning, husband." I set the porridge before him. "How is your appetite today?" "It is fine." He accepted the bowl and took a sip. "Wanjing, did you sleep well last night?" "Fairly well." I sat opposite him and picked up my chopsticks. There seemed to be some noise in the courtyard after midnight. Perhaps a stray cat came in. He slowly stirred his porridge, took a piece of pickle, and looked up at me. A smile lingered at his lips. "A stray cat," he said. "Do not worry, madam. The household servants beat it to death with sticks. It will cause no more trouble." "That is good." I lowered my head and ate. "That sort of cat is noisy and disturbs people's sleep." "Indeed." He nodded. "This residence may be old, but the courtyard walls are still sturdy. If 1 or 2 strays get in, we simply kill them and be done with it." "And if what comes in is not a cat?" I asked. He raised his tea and took a sip. "Then we deal with whatever comes." I asked nothing more. We finished breakfast in silence. The porridge and pickles were no better than usual, yet that morning they went down more easily than any meal in the past 3 years. Perhaps the wall between us had begun to crack. While carrying away the dishes, I passed the rockery in the rear courtyard. The ground was too clean. Fresh earth had clearly been spread and swept smooth before dawn. A 1-inch sword mark remained on the back of the stone, the dust not yet settled. It was the trace of a single killing stroke aimed at the throat in the darkness. I glanced at it and carried the dishes to the kitchen without changing my pace. On the 14th day of the 7th month, Shen Zihao and I went to the old family residence to honor his ancestors. Calling it a family residence was generous. It was only a ruined compound in the eastern quarter. The Shen family had once been prominent in the capital, but after my husband became paralyzed, relatives scattered, and the ancestral hall had gone unrepaired for years. Half its roof had collapsed. We traveled in an old carriage without any emblem. Even the curtains had been patched. He sat inside with a thin blanket over his knees, eyes closed as he rested. I sat opposite him holding a string of ritual paper money. On our return, the carriage suddenly stopped on Zukek Avenue. "What is it?" I lifted the curtain and looked out. Ahead, armored soldiers stood in 3 rows, 20 men to each line, their spears angled toward the sky. The points flashed white in the afternoon sun. Behind them waited 6 tall horses ridden by Zhao Heng's personal guards. Shops on both sides of the avenue shut their doors and dropped their bars. Pedestrians had been driven into side alleys, where they craned their necks to watch from a distance. Zhao Heng rode forward from behind the soldiers on a chestnut warhorse. In his hand was a riding crop, fitted with iron studs. "Shen Zihao." His voice echoed down the empty avenue. Shen Zihao lifted the curtain and allowed his guard to lower the wheelchair from the carriage. Sunlight fell over him, making his sickly figure appear almost translucent. Zhao Heng dismounted and walked straight up to him. 7 of my banks were emptied within 3 days. 80 million taels of silver vanished without a trace. He lowered his voice, each word heavy with threat. "Shen Zihao, do you truly believe that is a coincidence? I know nothing about your highness's banks." He lowered his head slightly. "I cannot even keep the allowance of my own household. How could I possess such ability?" Crack! The riding crop struck the wheelchair's armrest, sending splinters flying. The rosewood support, already cracked, finally broke apart, and half of it rolled across the ground. "Do not play the fool with me." Zhao Heng planted one boot on the wheelchair's footrest and looked down at him. "Get down." He did not move. "Crawl down." Zhao Heng kicked the back of the chair. It pitched forward, and my husband fell onto the stone road again. This time he did not cough blood. He lay face down with both hands braced against the ground, like a puppet knocked over. "Kneel properly." Zhao Heng circled him once. "Bark like a dog." Whispers rose from the civilians watching along both sides of the street. My husband remained on the ground without a word. When he received no answer, Zhao Heng lost patience. His gaze swept the crowd and stopped on me, as though he had suddenly thought of a new game. He laughed. "Men." Zhao Heng jerked his chin toward me. "Strip that ugly woman. Last time I did not get to see. Today, before everyone on this street, I want to know whether Shen Zihao will kneel and bark like a dog or stand by while his wife is stripped bare before them all." The deputy commander obeyed and led 2 soldiers toward me. I stood beside the carriage with my head lowered, my expression calm behind the veil. I was not waiting for rescue. I was waiting to see his reaction. As expected, his right hand moved. As the 3 men approached, he reached toward the side of the wheelchair. A hidden compartment held a thumb-sized black iron command token. If he crushed it, the Lone Moon Iron Cavalry concealed within 3 li would appear at once. He was about to reveal himself. 5 years of planning, 5 years of raising troops, 5 years of hiding his identity. He was about to stake everything in this moment simply because Zhao Heng wanted to humiliate me in public. I watched his shoulders tighten and his fingers reach the edge of the hidden compartment. Inwardly, I sighed. He could not expose himself now. The cavalry had not finished assembling, and the pieces at court were not yet in place. If Zhao Heng died today, the emperor's 150,000 capital troops could flatten the prime minister's residence within a day. Shen Zihao knew this perfectly well, yet he still intended to act because those 3 men were walking toward me. Behind my veil, I smiled despite myself. "Shen Zihao, you calculate better than anyone. But the moment I am involved, you forget the larger board." The deputy commander was only a few steps away. I lowered my head and drew in my shoulders like a frightened woman, while sliding my right foot half an inch back and lowering my center of gravity. If his hand moved 1 inch farther into that compartment, I would act before he could crush the token. 3 silver needles would seal the acupoints of the deputy commander and both soldiers. Then my flexible sword would hold Zhao Heng. It would take only a few breaths. The price would be exposing my own identity, but at least his final hidden card would remain intact. The deputy commander advanced 1 step, then another, then a third. His hand reached toward my collar. On the stone road, Shen Zihao's finger hooked the mechanism inside the hidden compartment. I heard the faint click of a spring. Everything seemed to stop. Sunlight lay across Zouk Avenue, across the terrified faces of the crowd, Zhao Heng's triumphant smile, and my husband's rigid back. 1 heartbeat later, the world would change. Then urgent hoofbeats thundered from the far end of the street. "Report! His Majesty has issued a verbal decree. The second prince must enter the palace immediately." A rider broke through the armored ranks and raced toward us. The palace attendant on horseback carried a golden command flag. The moment he stopped, he knelt before Zhao Heng. "Your Highness, His Majesty commands you to return to the palace at once." Zhao Heng stared at the command flag. The smile on his lips stiffened and vanished. "Understood." He mounted his horse. As he passed Shen Zihao, he bent low and spoke in a voice cold enough to freeze. "Shen Zihao, an imperial order may save you once, it will not save you forever." Hooves raised a cloud of dust as Zhao Heng led his men away from Zouk Avenue. The personal guard helped Shen Zihao back into his wheelchair, then respectfully stepped aside. I approached, crouched beside him, and brushed the dust from his robe. "Husband, it is over." He looked at me. His finger was still caught against the edge of the hidden compartment, rigid from force. I lowered his hand and concealed it beneath the thin blanket. "Let us go home," I said. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but in the end said nothing. The carriage began moving again, its wheels creaking over the stone road. Inside the dim compartment, I sat opposite him and watched composure gradually return to his face. What he did not know was that the life-saving imperial order had been arranged by me 3 days earlier. Wuxiang Pavilion had an agent inside the palace, an inconspicuous eunuch assigned to sweeping near the emperor. I had anticipated Zhao Heng's furious retaliation after the banks collapsed, so I instructed the agent to whisper to the emperor that the second prince had recently behaved without restraint in the capital, and might be preparing disorder. The emperor was suspicious by nature. Even a rumor was enough to make him act. That was why the order arrived at precisely the right moment. It came just before he crushed the token and just before I was forced to move. I leaned against the carriage wall and closed my eyes. There would be no such luck next time. Zhao Heng would not give us a third chance, and next time there would be no more restraint. Peace bought with an imperial order did not last 3 days. At dawn on the 4th day, Zhao Heng accused the prime minister's residence of sheltering rebels and once again surrounded Zuk Avenue with troops. This time, he brought far more than 60 men. 100 heavily armored infantry blocked each end of the avenue, cavalry stood in 2 rows along the street, and more than a dozen archers occupied the rooftops. Seen from above, Zuk Avenue was an iron hand closing into a fist, and our carriage had stopped in its palm. Zhao Heng was not mounted. He stood in the middle of the stone street. Behind him waited the deputy commander who had nearly touched my collar before. His left arm hung in a sling, an injury suffered while hunting the people who had emptied Zhao Heng's 7 banks. The deputy commander intended to settle that debt today as well. "Shen Zihao," Zhao Heng's voice cut through the cold morning. "Last time, an imperial order saved you. Today I want to see who will save you now." The personal guard lowered Shen Zihao from the carriage. He wore an old gray-white robe buttoned neatly at the collar. His face remained as gaunt as ever. I followed with my head lowered and my veil concealing most of my face. Zhao Heng descended the stone step and stopped before Shen Zihao. This time he wasted no words. He struck Shen Zihao across the face. The sound echoed along the avenue. Shen Zihao's head turned to one side, and blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. He slowly looked back at Zhao Heng without speaking. "Kneel," Zhao Heng ordered. Shen Zihao remained motionless in his wheelchair. "Do you not understand?" Zhao Heng leaned close and whispered something into his ear. I could not hear the words, but my husband's gaze changed at once. Then Zhao Heng straightened and nodded to the deputy commander. "Do it." The man obeyed and strode toward me. This time he did not hesitate. His left hand seized my arm, and his right reached for my collar. "His Highness has given his order. Today, one way or another, the whole street will see you stripped bare." His voice stopped because I moved, not with silver needles. Not with a hidden weapon. With my foot. I planted my right foot, turned my hips, drove all my strength into my left leg, and delivered a side kick to the center of his chest. The kick broke 4 of the deputy commander's ribs and his sternum. It hurled him more than 3 zhang, roughly 30 feet across the street, and through the stone wall at the corner. The wall collapsed, rubble burst outward, and he died beneath it. The force of the kick swept dust into the air. A warhorse tied nearby reared with a shrill cry, knocking Zhao Heng to the ground. He lay dazed, his ceremonial cap crooked, unable to hide his terror. Zuk Avenue fell completely silent. The gust of dust tore away my veil. It spun twice through the air and landed about 3 feet away. My true face was exposed beneath the sunlight. There was no red birthmark and no diseased sore, only clean, refined features, fine brows, clear eyes, and smooth pale skin. The effort of the strike had left a faint flush across my cheeks. Zhao Heng had just struggled upright. When he saw my face, he froze. The civilians fell silent. Archers forgot to draw, and cavalrymen forgot to raise their spears. Everyone stared, unable to understand what had happened. I did not look at them. I turned and walked toward him. He sat in his wheelchair looking up at me. Blood remained at the corner of his mouth, and Zhao Heng's handprint stood across his cheek. The sickly gentleness he had worn for 3 years was gone. He showed neither fear nor surprise. He only watched me for a long time, as though countless questions waited behind his silence. I held out my hand. "Husband." My voice was not loud, yet the entire avenue heard it. "Let us go home." He studied my hand for 3 breaths before placing his in mine. His hand was cold, but his grip was firm. Holding his hand, I pushed the wheelchair past Zhao Heng. The prince stepped back twice, one hand on the weapon at his waist, yet he did not dare draw it. He had just seen the power of my kick. Anyone capable of kicking a 200-jin armored man, well over 200 pounds, through a wall, could certainly move faster than he could draw a sword. No one followed us. The carriage rolled away, its wheels creaking over the stone. Inside the dark compartment, he still held my hand. He said nothing for a long time. Only after the carriage turned into the lane leading to the Prime Minister's residence did he finally speak. "Wan Jing, the mark on your face was not real. It was medicinal paste." He remained silent for a long time, then tightened his hold, not painfully, but with no intention of letting go. 3 years, he said. 3 years, I answered. The carriage stopped at the residence gate. Sunlight slipped through a gap in the curtain, dividing his face into light and shadow. He looked at me. The disguises we had worn for 3 years were beginning to break. The sickly prime minister in the wheelchair was slowly disappearing, revealing the real man beneath the disguise. That afternoon, the emperor issued a verbal order confining the prime minister's household to its residence. Soldiers of the imperial guard patrolled outside, and no one was permitted to enter or leave without authorization. Officially, it was for the prime minister's protection. In truth, it was house arrest. The deputy commander had been kicked through a stone wall with a single blow, and the entire court was shaken. The emperor wanted to know the true background of the prime minister's supposedly ugly wife. But that no longer mattered. The gates were barred, and the servants were dismissed to their separate quarters. In the vast main courtyard, only my husband and I remained. 2 red candles burned in the bedchamber. Their flames shifted in the draught, throwing alternating light and shadow across the walls. The folding screen that had separated us for 3 years remained in its old place, but it no longer meant anything. He was not sitting in the wheelchair. He stood. He pushed himself up deliberately slowly, imitating a man who had been bedridden for years and was testing his legs. But once he straightened, he was entirely different. His shoulders and back were steady, his waist strong, and his feet planted firmly on the floor. Every trace of weakness vanished, leaving only the presence of a man accustomed to holding life and death in his hands. He walked to the bronze mirror, studied his own reflection, then turned toward me. I had washed away the medicinal paste and revealed my true face. Silence stretched between us. At last he spoke first. "Wan Jing." His voice was no longer weak but deep and clear. "You hid yourself from me very well." I leaned against the table and lifted a cup of cold tea. "The same could be said of you. The master of Wuxiang Pavilion, feared throughout the martial world." He walked toward me with steady steps. The person who controls an intelligence network across the realm was the wife who had shared my life for 3 years. I took a sip of cold tea and set the cup down. And I never imagined that the crippled prime minister everyone despised was secretly an uncrowned king capable of commanding 100,000 soldiers of the Lone Moon Iron Cavalry. He stopped about 3 feet away. "When did you know?" "The first day I washed your legs," I said. "Your meridians were more open than those of a martial artist with 20 years of training. There was no trace of old injury in your knees. A man paralyzed for 5 years should not have had such tendons and bones." He nodded without surprise. "You were the masked figure in the alley that night." That movement technique was taught personally by the former master of Wuxiang Pavilion. Only 3 people in the world knew it. One of the other disciples died 10 years ago. The remaining person could only be you. "And you?" I asked. "Did you think I would not recognize the scent of pine needle salve? When you withdrew your sword, you controlled it precisely enough to stop before my shoulder. You would never show such mercy to a stranger." He was silent for a moment. "On the 3rd exchange, your movement revealed a flaw." "What flaw?" "The angle of your back when you avoided my sword was exactly the same as when you bent down every day to wash my legs." The corner of his mouth lifted, showing more helplessness than self-mockery. "I watched you for 3 years. I could recognize your back with my eyes closed." That explanation surprised me more than anything else. "So you suspected me from 3 years ago?" "It was not suspicion. I could not be certain." He turned his back to me. "If you truly were the master of Wuxiang Pavilion, every part of my plan had to be recalculated. I was not certain I could hide the Lone Moon Iron Cavalry from you. In truth, you did not hide it." "In truth, I did not hide it," he repeated, turning to look at me. We stared at each other while the candle flames trembled. I laughed. "Shen Zihao, do you not think the 2 of us are ridiculous?" "What is ridiculous?" "One person pretended to be paralyzed. The other pretended to be ugly. We lived beneath the same roof and spent 3 years separated by a folding screen, guarding against each other. You believed you were protecting me. I believed I was protecting you. In the end, neither of us needed protection." He did not answer immediately. After several breaths, he walked to the table, poured 2 cups of hot tea, pushed one toward me and kept the other. "It is not ridiculous," he said. If I had to do it again, I would still pretend. Why? Because throughout those 3 years I could not be certain who you were. He looked down at the tea in his cup and his voice became clearer. You were the only person I did not want to hurt. The candle flame jumped. I lifted my cup to hide the sudden warmth at my ears. The tea is cold, I said. I just poured it. We each took a sip. Outside the window came the clink of armor as the Imperial Guard changed shifts. They will break in tomorrow, I said, setting down my cup. Zhao Heng will not stop. And the Emperor will not waste a chance to weaken you. Has the cavalry finished assembling? 70%. 30,000 men outside the city need one more day to reach their ambush positions. Not enough. I shook my head. The Imperial Guard numbers 15,000, and Zhao Heng has another 3,000 private soldiers. A direct assault will only cost both sides heavily. Wuxiang Pavilion can handle intelligence, covert assassinations, and public opinion. But we have fewer than 1,000 people capable of a frontal battle. 1,000 is enough. He looked at me. They only need to stop the first wave when the gates are breached and buy the cavalry half an incense stick. Then I can reverse the situation. I considered it, then nodded. Very well. He extended his right hand. Bruises still marked the knuckles that had crushed the wheelchair armrest. I placed my hand in his. It was not merely a husband and wife joining hands. It was an alliance between two equals before the coming storm. Shen Zihao. I held his hand and looked into his eyes. Beginning tomorrow, we no longer need to act. He met my gaze. No more acting. I nodded. At dawn, the gate of the Prime Minister's residence was smashed open. The battering ram was an iron-bound timber thick enough for 2 men to encircle. 16 armored Imperial Guard soldiers carried it and struck the gate 3 times. On the 3rd blow, the stone pivot broke. The 2 heavy red-lacquered doors collapsed inward, raising a cloud of dust. Zhao Heng stood on an iron-plated carriage at the rear, his left arm wrapped in bandages and his face ashen. Beside him was Song Si, commander of the Imperial Guard, dressed in silver armor and holding the tiger tally granted by the Emperor. Shen Zihao! Zhao Heng had shouted until his voice became hoarse. Your demon wife has killed a member of the imperial household and intends rebellion. Today I searched this residence by imperial command. Tie yourself up and surrender if you know what is good for you. No one answered. Song Si frowned and signaled the infantry forward. 10,000 Imperial Guard soldiers divided into 3 columns and surged through the main gate and the 2 side gates. Spears formed a forest, shields locked into ranks, and iron armor rang steadily against the stone. When the soldiers entered the front courtyard, the scene before them was nothing like what they expected. There were no obstacles, no cavalry, and no hidden archers. The courtyard stood empty except for 2 chairs placed on the steps of the main hall. I sat on the left. My husband sat on the right. He was not in his wheelchair. He wore a black robe with fitted sleeves, and at his waist hung a long sword no one had seen before. Its dark gray scabbard had no decoration and looked almost plain. But anyone who understood weapons could tell it weighed at least 7 jin, about 3.5 kilograms, and had been forged and tempered many times. It was a weapon only a commander seasoned by countless battles could wield. Zhao Heng leaned halfway out of his armored carriage. The moment he saw my husband standing, all color left his face. Your legs? Thanks to your highness. After 5 years of recuperation, I have finally recovered, he said from the steps, his voice not loud yet carrying clearly to every man. Song Si's hand closed around his saber. The veteran commander's instincts warned him that something was wrong. Shen Zihao, do you truly intend to defy the imperial order? He did not answer him. He turned his head toward me. I leaned back in my chair with one leg crossed over the other. Between the index and middle fingers of my right hand, I held a small jade whistle. It was white, no larger than the first joint of a thumb, and carved with an inconspicuous nameless flower. Madam. My husband smiled at me in invitation. I raised the whistle to my lips and blew a note as soft as a bird calling its flock. Most people in the courtyard did not even hear it. Immediately figures appeared across the rooftops, walls, corridors, behind the rockery, inside a dry well, and beside the kitchen water jars. 1,000 people dressed in dark gray clothing and iron masks carried flexible swords, chain blades, poisoned crossbows, and metal claws. They emerged without a sound behind and along both flanks of the Imperial Guard, then dropped to one knee together. Greetings, Pavilion Master. 1,000 voices joined into a single wave of sound that shook the walls of the Prime Minister's residence. The Imperial Guard formation fell into disorder. They had fought on battlefields, but they had never seen 1,000 masked assassins appear from all 4 sides and surround them. Zhao Heng lost every trace of arrogance. Wuxiang Pavilion. Your Highness is well informed. I rose from the chair and descended the steps. Good. That saves me the trouble of introducing myself. Songsi drew his saber but did not issue an order. He was calculating the strength of those 1,000 people and the price of battle. I allowed him to calculate. My husband did not. He rose and walked into the center of the courtyard, then drew his war sword. The deep sound of steel leaving its sheath seemed to rise from the earth itself. He pointed the blade through the broken gates. For one moment, nothing happened. Then hoofbeats sounded in the distance, faint at first, then rapidly growing into thunder. The ground trembled, water rippled in jars, and roof tiles clicked against one another. Armored cavalry flooded the streets around the residence from the east, west, and north. They wore matching black iron heavy armor and rode black warhorses protected by metal faceplates. Each carried a cavalry lance more than 12 feet long. Hooves struck sparks from the stone. At the head of the formation, a great black banner flew through the dust. It bore no words or elaborate design, only a silver crescent moon. 3,000 soldiers of the Lone Moon Iron Cavalry blocked every retreat outside the residence from 3 directions. Songsi understood that the situation had passed beyond control. "Form ranks for battle," he ordered Commander Song. My husband's voice cut through the hoofbeats. "Another 27,000 men wait outside the city. Your 15,000 Imperial Guard soldiers are not enough." Songsi tightened his grip on his saber. He was furious, but fury could not alter the balance of force. Zhao Heng tumbled from the armored carriage and sagged against a wheel, his lips moving without forming words. I stepped to my husband's side. He held his sword steady. I rested one hand on the flexible sword at my waist. He turned toward me, morning light reflected in his eyes. "Madam, shall we cleanse the capital together today?" I looked at him. The sharpness he had concealed for years now stood fully revealed, powerful, with no path of retreat remaining. "Yes," I said. As that single word fell, the 1,000 elite operatives of Wuxiang Pavilion behind me rose and drew their weapons. The 3,000 Lone Moon cavalry behind him lifted their lances, every point aimed toward the sky. Songsi looked at the Imperial Guard soldiers surrounded on all sides, then at the two of us. He lowered his saber and knelt on one knee. "I submit to the Prime Minister's command." Zhao Heng lay on the ground and released a broken, bitter laugh. After the confrontation at the Prime Minister's residence, the balance of the capital changed within half a day. News of Songsi's surrender spread quickly from Zuke Avenue into every alley and noble residence. By noon, 14 court officials had removed their formal robes and sent servants to the Prime Minister's residence to test the situation. I did not receive them. I had something more important to do. Wuxiang Pavilion's intelligence network, hidden in the capital for 6 years, was fully activated. 67 informants worked within government offices, noble households, shops, taverns, and even brothels. Within half a day, they collected and organized letters proving collusion with foreign enemies, evidence of corruption, and lists of Zhao Heng's private soldiers and accomplices from the past 5 years. More than 300 copies were made. 100 copies were pasted on public notice boards and outside tea houses throughout the capital for the people to read. 100 were carried by Wuxiang Pavilion messengers to provincial administrations and delivered to officials who had long resented Zhao Heng's oppression but had not dared speak against him. The final 100 were arranged neatly on the long table in the main hall of the Prime Minister's residence, waiting for the court officials to inspect in person. The accusations recorded that over 5 years, Zhao Heng had embezzled 84 million taels from salt and iron taxes to support more than 3,000 private soldiers. He had colluded with northern enemy forces 17 times and sold 3 maps of the frontier defenses, causing 3 northern cities to fall and 70,000 civilians to lose their homes. The evidence was complete. Letters bore seals and fingerprints that could be verified. This was not fabricated slander, it was judgment. My husband handled the other half of the operation. Within 2 hours, the Lone Moon Iron Cavalry took control of the capital's main gates without shedding blood. The officers guarding the city chose not to resist when 30,000 armored riders approached. Shen Zihao merely deployed the troops outside each gate and sent in a letter. "Open the gate, or I will open it for you." All 9 city gates opened within half an incense stick. By evening, Lone Moon patrols moved along every main road in the capital. Order was better than on an ordinary day. No one dared cause trouble under the eyes of the cavalry. The reckoning began on the 2nd day. The list I prepared contained 43 names, Zhao Heng's followers, those who tried to change sides when the wind shifted, and those who had trampled the Prime Minister's household when they believed it powerless. Nanny Sun was 37th. Behind every name was precise evidence. How much silver had been taken, how many reports had been sent to Zhao Heng, how many letters had been delivered, and what each person had done in secret. Wuxiang Pavilion had even discovered that Nanny Sun used the allowance she stole over 3 years to purchase a shop in the southern quarter. The property deed was included. Each search was carried out cleanly. The cavalry arrived, presented the evidence, sealed the property, and escorted the accused away. No one had room to deny the charges. On the third day, I stood before the gate of the Prime Minister's residence and watched carts of confiscated goods roll toward the national treasury. Several prison carts passed by. The people inside recognized me, the ugly woman they had mocked, the one who brought water and washed the Prime Minister's legs, the one who endured Nanny Sun's scalding water without resistance. They stared at my uncovered face, now free of the false mark. Some cried, some protested their innocence. Others gripped the bars and called my name, begging in terror. I showed no emotion. Standing on the steps, I looked beyond them toward the horizon. It was not because I hated them. They were simply no longer worth my attention. When Nanny's Sun was brought out, her legs had gone so weak that 2 cavalrymen had to support her under the arms. The moment she passed me, she collapsed to her knees and struck her forehead against the ground until it bled. "Young madam, spare me! Young madam, spare me!" This old servant was blind. I crouched and looked directly at her. 3 years ago, when you poured scalding water on my skirt, I remained silent not because I feared you, but because I would not expose my identity over 1 kettle of water. She trembled so badly she could barely lift her head. Every tale you withheld, every bowl of spoiled porridge you brought, and every cruel word you spoke, I remember them all. I stood, brushed dust from my hands. But I will not kill you for those things. You are not worth that much. The shop in the southern quarter, with principal and interest, will be enough to pay for 10 years of prison meals. I turned back toward the residence. Nanny's Sun's cries were soon drowned beneath the sound of armor. My husband waited before the main hall. "Is everything settled?" he asked. "All 43. Not one escaped." He nodded and handed me a cup of hot tea. "You have worked hard." I accepted it and took a sip. It was fresh tea, no longer the inferior leaves we had once been given. Warmth seeped from the cup into my hands, and I suddenly realized how long it had been since I had felt such peace. Zhao Heng had been imprisoned in the death row dungeon of the imperial clan court for 5 days. The prison lay 3 zhang ruli 30 feet underground and never saw sunlight. Its stone walls were damp, and the air carried rust, mold, and filth. Shen Zihao and I descended the narrow steps one behind the other. The guards followed at a distance, not daring to come close. Zhao Heng huddled in a corner of the cell. His unwashed hair hung over his face and his robe was filthy, torn and stained with dried blood. The bandage around his left arm had darkened, and the untreated wound had begun to fester and give off a foul odor. At the sound of footsteps he looked up. When he saw us, fear and resentment crossed his face, though he forced himself to preserve the last trace of princely pride. "Shinzahao." He leaned against the wall and formed an ugly smile. "Have you come to laugh at me?" He did not answer. He stood beyond the bars and looked down at Zhao Heng as though he were discarded refuse. When Zhao Heng saw me, his smile twisted further. "I never imagined it. Shenzahao, you pretended to be paralyzed for 5 years and deceived even me." He coughed twice and spat out blood-streaked phlegm. "But no matter how capable you are still a useless man who climbed to the throne by relying on a woman. That demoness has blood on her hands. Aren't you afraid she will slit your throat in your sleep?" Shenzahao's expression did not change. He stepped to the bars, signaled the guard to open the cell, and entered. Then he sat opposite Zhao Heng. "Zhao Heng," he said quietly. "Repeat what you just said." Zhao Heng glared at him, the crooked smile still on his face. "I said you married a..." He reached out slowly, making certain Zhao Heng saw the hand approaching. His fingers closed around the prince's throat. Zhao Heng clawed at his wrist, but Shen Zihao's arm remained steady as iron. He tightened his grip. Zhao Heng kicked against the stone, a strangled sound escaping him. "You may insult me," Shen Zihao said evenly. "You struck me, kicked me, forced me into the mud, and ordered me to crawl and bark. I could endure all of that." His grip tightened again, reducing Zhao Heng's protests to broken gasps. His gaze turned colder. "But you should not have touched her." I stood at the cell entrance and watched without trying to stop him. Shen Zihao tightened his grip one final time. Zhao Heng's hand slipped from his wrist, and a dry crack sounded before his body went limp. Shen Zihao released him and stood. Zhao Heng collapsed against the stone floor, unmoving. He left the cell, stopped before me, and looked at his right hand. "Dirty." I took a handkerchief from my sleeve and offered it to him. He carefully wiped his hand, folded the cloth, and returned it. "Let us go," he said. "There is one more matter." We climbed the stone stairs, Behind us, the prison guard's legs gave way as soon as he entered the cell. What matter? I asked. The emperor, he replied. The emperor had been ill for 3 months. The imperial physicians said he would not survive the autumn. He now lay in his bedchamber, unable even to turn over, attended only by 2 frightened old eunuchs. When we arrived, his clouded eyes were half open, fixed on the bed curtains. Your Majesty. Shen Zihao stood beside the bed and maintained proper courtesy. But there was no warmth in his voice. The second prince, Zhao Heng, rebelled and has been punished. The remaining princes are too young to bear the weight of the realm. A nation cannot be without a ruler for even 1 day. I ask your Majesty to decide quickly. The emperor struggled to move his lips. Only after a long time did a few faint words emerge. You want my realm? I do not, he said. But I must take it. I drew a prepared abdication decree from my sleeve and spread it beside the emperor's pillow. The document followed every required form. It bore the seal of the Central Secretariat and the emperor's private seal. 3 months earlier, Wuxiang Pavilion had obtained an impression of the emperor's private seal through the chief eunuch and reproduced it from a wax mold. No ordinary eye could distinguish the copy from the original. The decree was simple. The throne would pass to Prime Minister Shen Zihao. The emperor stared at it, and tears slid from his clouded eyes. I am not willing. Your Majesty need not be willing. I gathered the decree again, my voice still calm. It has already been sealed. Tomorrow it will be proclaimed throughout the realm. This consort came only to inform your Majesty. I turned toward the door. Behind me came the emperor's weak, broken sobs. Shen Zihao followed me. After several steps, he suddenly stopped. Wan Jing. Yes? You just called yourself this consort. I turned around. He was smiling. It was faint but clearly visible beneath the palace lamps. You said it a little early. I did not answer. I merely turned away and continued walking. On the second day after the abdication decree was announced, the remnants of the aristocratic clans launched their final counterattack. The 4 great families Chen, Zheng, Wang, and Liu joined several hundred surviving private soldiers of Zhao Heng and assembled nearly 5,000 rebels. Under cover of night, they seized Xuande Gate. Xuande Gate was the final barrier between the inner city and the imperial palace. Holding it was like closing a fist around the road to the throne. The rebels planned to defend it while waiting for reinforcements. The 4 families still had relatives and old allies in the provinces. If they held for 10 days or half a month, loyalist armies might arrive. Their plan was not foolish, but they had misunderstood one thing. They believed this would be decided by numbers alone. I had never intended to attack them head-on. The moment they seized the gate, I climbed Chengtian Tower opposite it. The night wind snapped my red cloak behind me. Below, rebel torches stretched along the walls like a fiery serpent. Shen Zihao stood beside me holding the defense map I had just drawn. They have built 3 defensive lines, I said. The first is at the watchtower, about 800 infantry. The second is on the gate tower, with 500 archers. The third is split along both sides of the wall, 1,500 men on each side. The main gate is blocked from within by iron chains and boulders. A direct assault would cost at least 2,000 men. How do you know so much? Because 11 people inside belong to Wuxiang Pavilion. He glanced at me and I opened one hand. Pieces placed 6 years ago. Today they finally have a use. He lowered his gaze to the map and tapped the watchtower. Can your people open the gate? Not without an opportunity. We need a diversion at the front torches and toys to pull their attention toward the wall. How many men will the diversion require? 3,000 cavalry, for half an incense stick. He folded the map and looked toward Xuande Gate, torchlight shifting across his face. Half an incense stick. That is enough. The Lone Moon Iron Cavalry had already formed before Xuande Gate. 3,000 heavy riders stood in 3 wedge-shaped ranks, lances leveled. The breath of the war horses formed pale clouds in the night air. Shen Zihao rode a black horse at the front. It was the first time in 5 years he had returned to the saddle. His back was straight. His war sword rested across the saddle, and the black cloth tied to its hilt streamed in the wind. He raised his right hand. 3,000 riders lifted their lances together. His hand fell. Hoofbeat erupted like thunder as the heavy cavalry charged toward Xuande Gate. The wall immediately fell into confusion. Archers released volleys of arrows. Heavy black iron armor stopped most of them, though more than 10 riders were struck and fell from their horses. The cries of horses and the clash of steel echoed around the gate. The cavalry reached the base of the wall but did not truly attempt to storm it. They repeatedly changed direction, charged and wheeled away, raising dust and thunderous noise. The defenders were forced to concentrate on the front. As expected, more than half the troops guarding the watchtower were redeployed. From Chengtian Tower I counted 60 breaths, then the side door opened. 3 gray-clad figures slipped through, subdued the 2 sentries, and widened the opening. The iron chains and boulders, blocking the main gate, were removed one after another. By the time the rebels understood, it was too late. 3,000 cavalry flooded through the gate and tore apart the defensive line. Soldiers dropped their weapons and scattered, but every escape route had already been sealed. 6 hours earlier, I had calculated every possible route and assigned Wuxiang Pavilion operatives to guard them. The fighting lasted less than 1 incense stick. At dawn, the banner over Xuande Gate had changed. A black flag bearing a silver crescent rose through the settling dust. The moon shining against the last dying torchlight, I descended Chengtian Tower and crossed the field of broken weapons and abandoned armor toward the gate. He dismounted beneath the arch. A few drops of blood, no one knew who's marked his armor. When he saw me, he reached out and took my hand. Together we passed through Xuande Gate and climbed the white marble steps. Morning dew had diluted the blood on the white marble steps to pale pink, like a dish of rouge spilled across the stone. The heads of the 4 great families knelt in a row atop the gate tower, bound and drained of color. Their lips moved, but no words came. The once arrogant great clans could only wait for judgment. He did not look at them. Neither did I. We stood at the summit of Xuande Gate and watched the first light appear in the east. Dawn slowly spread across the capital, shining over the cavalry stationed in the streets, the crescent banner above the wall, and the ground beneath our feet once soaked with old blood. He held my hand. Neither of us spoke. There was no need. The blades, schemes, and long road behind us had already said everything. The coronation was set for the 9th day of the month. The tailors had 7 days to complete the dragon robe and ceremonial crown. The Central Secretariat spent 3 days drafting the reign title and proclamations. The Ministry of Works spent 5 days repairing the Golden Throne Hall. Everyone worked day and night, afraid of making a mistake. The day of the ceremony was cloudless. Shen Zihao wore a black imperial robe embroidered with a 5-clawed golden dragon from shoulder to hem and stood upon the dais of the Golden Throne Hall. In the sunlight, he looked so imposing that it was difficult to connect him with the gaunt prime minister who had once sat in a wheelchair and been thrown into the mud. I stood beside the dais in a red ceremonial robe, with no veil and no medicinal paste. Beneath the phoenix crown, my hair was arranged high and secured with only an old wooden hairpin. The story of that hairpin would come later. The civil and military officials stood in 2 orderly lines, dressed in full court robes. The minister of the Court of Imperial Sacrifices finished reading the abdication decree. When he accepted the imperial jade seal, every official performed the 3 kneelings and 9 prostrations. Their acclamation thundered from the Golden Throne Hall to the palace gates. At that moment, a voice interrupted the ceremony. "Your Majesty, this old minister has a memorial." Zhou Chongde, Minister of Rights, stepped from the ranks, lifted his robe, and knelt below the dais. He was over 60, silver-bearded and thin. This old minister dares to speak. His aged voice still carried throughout the hall. Prime Minister's wife Shen Wanjing has an unclear background and employs ruthless methods. The entire court knows this. Now that your Majesty has ascended the throne, virtuous women should be chosen for the inner palace. A woman of the martial world cannot be permitted to interfere in state affairs. This concerns the next 100 years of the dynasty. I beg your Majesty to order her into the inner palace and forbid her from participating in government. He struck his forehead heavily against the white marble floor. The hall fell silent. Then 5 or 6 elder officials stepped forward and knelt behind Zhou Chongde. This minister agrees. This minister also agrees. The inner palace must not interfere in government. It is an ancestral rule and cannot be abolished. I stood on the steps and looked down. Some truly believed they were defending ritual law. Others were remnants of the 4 great families, using the moment to test our limits. I said nothing. Shen Zihao had already moved. He descended from the dais, the hem of his dragon robe sweeping the steps, and stopped before Zhou Chongde. "Minister Zhou," he said clearly, "you have served as an official for 40 years and witnessed 3 reigns. In seniority, no civil or military official at court surpasses you." Zhou Chongde lowered his head further, but his voice remained firm. "This old minister does not deserve such praise. I speak only on public affairs." He drew his war sword. Steel flashed and Zhou Chongde's official hat was split in 2 and fell to the floor. Zhou Chongde jerked upright, terror plain on his face. Shen Zihao returned the sword to its sheath and walked through the side door behind the hall. A short while later, Shen Zihao returned, followed by 4 teams of attendants carrying something heavy. It was a chair, no, another throne identical to the first. The two dragon thrones were placed, side by side at the highest point of the golden throne hall. Both were covered in the same golden brocade, and carved with 5 clawed dragons. Neither stood above the other. Every official reacted differently to the second throne. He walked to me and held out his hand. A thin layer of sweat lay across his palm, a rare sign of nervousness. "Wanjing, sit there with me." I looked at his hand, then at the certainty in his eyes, and placed my hand in his. He led me up the steps, past the stunned rows of officials, and toward the 2 thrones. We sat down together. Outside the hall, 1,000 elite operatives of Wuxiang Pavilion stood in formation, their iron masks reflecting sunlight. At both palace gates, the lances of the Lone Moon Iron Cavalry rose like a forest. Zhou Chongde remained kneeling. His lips moved several times, but no further words came. The elder officials behind him lowered their heads one after another. Shen Zihao sat on his throne and glanced toward me. Not accustomed to it? I leaned back and looked over the dark mass of officials below. "It is acceptable," I said. "The chair is a little hard." He laughed. It was the most genuine smile I had seen from him in 3 years. There was no banquet on the night of the coronation, no music or dancing, and no extravagant display. Only 2 lamps burned in the newly renovated bedchamber. Their flames were steady, occasionally crackling. I sat before the bronze mirror, removing my ornaments. The red ceremonial robe had been changed for a moon-white inner garment, and my hair fell over my shoulders. The face that had appeared sharp and commanding at court now showed only the weariness of a young woman. He stepped out from behind the folding screen. He had also changed from his dragon robe into dark blue clothing with a slightly loose collar. He stood behind me for a while, then reached out and removed the phoenix crown. He lifted the heavy ornament with both hands and carefully set it at the corner of the dressing table. "Did your neck ache after wearing it all day?" "It was manageable." He did not leave. He remained behind me, watching through the mirror. After a moment, he took a wooden hairpin from inside his robe. It was about the length of a hand. A pear blossom had been carved at its head, rather clumsily, and one petal still carried a rough edge that had never been fully sanded. Yet the shaft had been polished smooth from repeated handling. He had clearly kept it close for a long time. He offered it to me with unusual awkwardness. During those 3 years at the Prime Minister's residence, whenever I could not sleep, I practiced carving wood. At first, nothing I made looked like anything. I discarded more than 10 blocks before I barely managed to carve a flower. He spoke more slowly than usual, not like an emperor newly crowned, but like a young man giving his first gift. "Wanjing, I did not know your true appearance. I believed the mark on your face was real. When I carved this hairpin, I thought that even if it was not beautiful, perhaps you would not dislike it." He hesitated. "Now if you find it too crude, I can have one made of gold." I accepted the hairpin. The wood was light but still warm from his hand. Along the end were small words carved with a knife, each stroke clumsy but sincere. "For Wanjing, carved by Zihao." I traced the inscription for a moment, then placed the pin in my hair without looking into the mirror or adjusting it. It sat crooked behind my ear. "There is no need for gold," I said. He looked at the wooden pin. The tension in his eyes eased and his happiness became impossible to hide. I stood and stepped close enough that only a hand's width remained between us. My fingertips rested against his chest. Through the thin cloth, his heartbeat was fast and clear, nothing like the composure he showed on a battlefield. "Shen Zihao." I looked up at him. "You spent 3 years carving, and this is the best you could do?" He froze, then laughed helplessly. "In the first year, I carved 6. Everyone split. In the second year, I finally made one, but that was the night you climbed through the window. The wind knocked it to the floor and broke it. This is the 7th one from the 3rd year." I rested my forehead against his chest. He stiffened for a moment, then wrapped his arms around my shoulders. His embrace slowly tightened, as though erasing the folding screen that had stood between us for 3 years, the masked tests, the hidden doubts, and all the nights when both of us pretended to sleep. His chin rested against the top of my head and his low voice came through his chest. "Wanjing, from now on, neither of us needs to act. Ugly or beautiful, weak prime minister or cavalry commander, you are yourself and I am myself." I closed my eyes and gripped the front of his robe. Moonlight passed through the gauze curtain and spread a thin silver layer across the floor. Only our breathing remained in the bedchamber. The folding screen no longer stood between us. 4 years later, a row of crabapple trees grew in the eastern garden of the imperial palace. I had chosen the saplings, and Shen Zihao had personally dug the holes and planted them. That afternoon, both of us sat in the mud for hours, our imperial robes stained while the attending eunuchs worried themselves sick. The crabapple trees had now grown taller than a person. Every spring, Blossoms covered the branches until they bent under the weight. Pink petals filled the air and the wind, drifting onto the stone courtyard, the lake, and the chains of the swing. I sat on the swing beneath the corridor. Beside me was a warm cup of green tea. Soft sunlight and the March breeze carried the scent of flowers and young grass across my face. In the courtyard, my husband was teaching our son swordsmanship. The child was 3.5, round-faced and wide-eyed. He raised a small wooden sword over his head and brought it down with all his strength. Wrong. He crouched, held our son's wrist, and corrected the angle. The sword should travel downward from the shoulder, not chop from above your head. If you swing like that, you will hit your own leg before you touch an enemy. But father, an enemy's leg is still part of the enemy. He fell silent for a moment. That is true, but it is still wrong. Holding my tea, I watched father and son seriously debate which of his enemy's legs should be targeted and could not keep from laughing. After practicing a few more movements, the child lost patience, threw down the wooden sword, and ran after butterflies. Shenzhou did not scold him. He brushed dirt from his knees and walked toward me. 4 years as emperor had made him more composed, but the gentleness in his eyes whenever he looked at me had never changed. He stepped the cloak beside the swing and draped it over my shoulders. The wind has risen, he said. March winds can still be cold. You coughed twice just now. I only choked on the tea. He did not argue. He simply tied the cloak neatly at my neck. I lifted a hand to touch the wooden hairpin in my hair. For 4 years I had continued wearing that pear blossom pin. The shaft had grown smooth and my fingers had polished away the rough edge on the petal, but the inscription for Wanxing, carved by Zihao, remained as clear as the first day. He sat beside me, took my cup, drank and frowned. It is cold. It was hot a moment ago. You held it without drinking because you were watching me teach our son to attack people's legs. He smiled helplessly, stood and went inside for fresh tea. I leaned back on the swing and watched him walk away. 4 years earlier, in the bedchamber of the Prime Minister's residence, a folding screen had separated us. Each of us wore a disguise, lying in darkness and listening while the other pretended to sleep. At that time, I believed I would spend my entire life in the shadows of Wuxiang Pavilion, weaving one intelligence network after another with secrets and silver needles, never allowing anyone to see my true self. I had married into the Prime Minister's residence because of a political betrothal. I remained because, within that crumbling residence, there was a man who wore a disguise like mine and tried, clumsily but stubbornly, to protect me. He did not know I needed no protection, just as I did not know he needed no shelter from me. But during those 3 years of guarding against each other while drawing closer, affection grew beneath our masks without either of us realizing when it began. Then the masks broke. Armies rose, the realm overturned, and after all of it, the crabapple trees bloomed. He returned with a fresh cup of tea and placed it beside my hand. What are you thinking about? He sat down beside me. I was thinking. I wrapped my hands around the cup for warmth. If you had not pretended to be paralyzed and I had not pretended to be ugly, what would have happened to us? He thought for a moment. Perhaps we truly would have fought in that dark alley. And then I would have lost. I glanced at him. How do you know? Your flexible sword was half a move faster than mine, he answered with complete seriousness. If you had countered with a 4th strike that night, I could not have stopped it. I withdrew because I smelled the pine needles on you. And I withdrew because I recognized your back. We looked at each other for a moment, then both turned away. In the distance, our son chased a butterfly halfway around the courtyard and ran headfirst into a flower bush. He crawled out with petals tangled through his hair and grinned at us. Mother, I caught it! He ran over and opened his palm. There was nothing inside. The butterfly had already flown away. I bent and kissed his mud-smudged cheek. You caught it, that is what matters. He lifted our son and brushed the petals from his hair. The child curled against his chest and soon grew drowsy. Crabapple blossoms continued drifting through the wind. Petals fell into my tea, rested on his shoulder, and settled in our child's closing hand. I leaned back on the swing with the cloak warm around my shoulders, a cup of hot tea beside me, and spring blazing before my eyes. I once believed I would live forever as the master of Wuxiang Pavilion, hidden in darkness and allowing no one to see my true face. In the end, I used my own plans and strength to rebuild order from ruin, and found someone with whom I could finally remove every mask. No one saved me, and I did not save anyone. We were simply 2 masked people feeling our way through darkness, moving toward each other until we stepped into the light together. The wind chimes beneath the corridor rang softly. I closed my eyes and let the sun warm my lashes, wanting only to sit beside them a little longer.